Not more. Okay, here we go. Okay, good evening and welcome to the May 28th, 2019 Truckee Town Council meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Judy or Sarah, may we have the roll call, please?
Here. Vice Mayor Goodwin.
Here.
Mayor Tierman.
Here.
Councilmember Abrams. Here. And Councilmember Pallavi.
Here. Okay. At this point, I'd like to ask Gerald Herrick to help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would all rise.
Join me. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Gerald. At this point, we're going to open up our agenda for public comment, and this is for anything that is not on the agenda tonight. So if there's any general or specific public comment not on the agenda, now's the time. If you would mind, please stating your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
This on? Okay.
Sounds like it. Yep.
Good evening, staff. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I only have 3 minutes, so I'll get right to it. My name's Dave Peterson. I'm not currently a resident of Truckee or Tahoe Donner, but my wife and I sure hope to be at some point in the future. It has been a dream of my wife to raise our kids in a community like Truckee, and I hope to make that a reality. I'm here today to ask the council to reopen the discussion for the potential of having a storefront cannabis dispensary within the town of Truckee. I understand what the current regulation and law is, and I know you spent 2 long years working towards that and creating that environment. I don't want to take anything away from that. The framework for developing the regulations for a storefront in Truckee are already done because you allow mobile dispensaries. I would like to bring to your attention changes in the industry that has occurred since you implemented your regulations last August. 8 states and territories have legalized cannabis, and hemp has become federally legal. Recently, 2 cannabis bills have been introduced into Congress, the States Act and the Federal Safe Banking Act, which has been endorsed by 38 attorney generals, 20 senators, and 182 House of Representatives. We can all see that we're headed towards descheduling and federal legalization. My goal, if the city were to reconsider the storefront ban, is seamlessly, quietly, and with little conflict as possible, integrate into the beautiful, unique environment of Truckee. I believe with full cooperation and care given to the city and community, I will be able to provide the city's residents and tourists with a safe, regulated place to purchase their recreational and medical cannabis products. A walk-in dispensary would not only allow those buying cannabis to purchase safe, tested, regulated products, but I intend to offer a wide range of educational and informational seminars on the benefits and hazards of using cannabis. You may think now, due to my topic of discussion, that I'm currently in the cannabis industry, but I'm actually a career military member. I'm currently serving on active duty working with the National Guard. I've spent the last 11 years working with law enforcement, ranging from the DEA, FBI, many federal, state, tribal, and local law enforcement agencies that work towards the suppression and destruction of illicit narcotics production and distribution. I've worked closely with cannabis regulatory agencies, which give me a wealth of knowledge of the business on both sides of the regulation. I'm forced now with a potential medical separation from the military due to injuries sustained over my last few combat deployments. So a career change is inevitable. To clarify my intent, I not only want to add a successful, valuable, profitable business to the economy of Truckee, but I intend to support all the community programs that make Truckee a special place to live. I'm not here asking for a storefront license today. I'm just asking if the council would be willing to engage me in future discussions on changing the current regulation in Truckee. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And just so you know, we're not able to take any kind of action on public comment that's not agendized, but certainly we'll take your comments into consideration. Thank you. Any other public comment tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll bring this back. And we have a number of presentations tonight. And the first one up is related to the Truckee Day Hall of Fame. So I'm going to go to the podium, and I think we'll have, is it Dwayne and Gerald? Okay.
Sheila. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to read this.
All right.
Can I hold something?
Yeah, maybe you can hold these two.
Okay.
You got three in a row here. Okay, this is a very special proclamation recognizing Truckee Day and a Truckee Day champion in particular. And I think we're in about year number 16 or so, and Truckee Day is only 4 days away. So this coming Saturday, June 1st. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and read this proclamation. Whereas Truckee Day happens the first Saturday in June each year and will celebrate its 16th anniversary, there it is, 16 years on Saturday, June 1st, 2019. And whereas the event is a town-wide community effort to pick up and properly dispose of roadside litter in preparation for the summer season, and whereas Clear Capital has been Truckee Day's signature sponsor since 2011, contributing generously to help fund logistical and promotional costs for the cleanup, and whereas Clear Capital was founded in 2001 by Dwayne Andrews and Kevin Marshall in Truckee, California, with the mission to introduce simpler, more delightful to use real estate valuation, analytics, and platform technology solutions to an industry relying on antiquated tools, and to pioneer a lasting company culture in an industry that is missing one. More than 18 years later, did you guys write this? Or?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. Okay.
A bit of a sense of humor.
Okay. I like that. All right. More than 18 years later, Clear Capital calls some of the nation's largest financial institutions its customers, and whereas Dwayne Andrews, CEO and co-founder, nurtures Clear Capital's longtime partnerships and pushes the team to show up at their best every day. Prior to co-founding Clear Capital, Dwayne founded REO Network, an online directory of real estate professionals who specialize in marketing real estate-owned properties. And whereas Kevin Marshall, president and co-founder, sits at the center of all that Clear Capital does, leading the company's relentless attention to detail and inspiring the team to pioneer tomorrow's revolutionary technology today. Prior to co-founding Clear Capital, Kevin worked at both private and venture-funded organizations on the tech industry's earliest efforts to build secure, web-based government and financial applications. And whereas Dwayne and Kevin are not busy when they're not busy working or serving their community in other volunteer efforts such as Truckee Boosters, the Truckee Tahoe Air Show, Truckee Tribe Lacrosse Team, and the Boys and Girls Club of North Lake Tahoe, Dwayne can be found participating in triathlons and Kevin racing cars. And whereas Clear Capital and Dwayne Andrews and Kevin Marshall are being recognized as distinguished Truckee citizens who have shown a commitment to the betterment of the town of Truckee. Now therefore, be it resolved that Clear Capital is receiving the Truckee Day Hall of Fame Award for 2019 to honor their historic and ongoing contributions towards making Truckee Day a successful event year after year and helping to keep Truckee clean and green on this 28th day of May 2019. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
You're welcome to say a few words if you like.
Yeah, we started Clear Capital in 2001 up here. We had an office above the Blue Coyote, and we had 600 square feet, and we crammed 13 people in there. And every time the fire marshal came, we were scrambling to hide the extension cords, but we grew out of that and went over to Pioneer Center. Our first ad in the newspaper for looking for help was Clear Capital looking for nice people, and we called up the Sierra Sun and wanted to put that ad in there. Said you can't say that. You have to put in the requirements that the skill sets needed and things like that. And we replied, we can teach Excel skills, we can teach computer skills, but you just can't teach nice. And that is what Truckee really did for us. We hired so many nice people that were eager to learn the other skill sets, eager to help the customers out, eager to make each other's lives better, eager to make the appraisers' lives better. And we were able to, with that spirit and that culture, able to grow at a really amazing pace. Right now, we're the third biggest valuation company in the country, and we're the largest privately held valuation company in the country. We have 550 employees, and Sheila is our chief people officer. She does a great job of keeping that culture that I just talked about alive and well at Clear Capital. We still have about 75 folks here in Truckee, and right over at the airport building over there. And the town of Truckee continues to be really, really supportive of us. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Dwayne, and again, thank you for all that Clear Capital does for our community on Truckee Day, especially. Okay, we have two more proclamations this evening. Next one, I'd like to call up the group representing the National Gun Violence Awareness Day. Hi.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Dana.
Dana.
Christina.
Christina.
Lacey. Nice to meet you.
Lacey, okay. All right, we have a proclamation to recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And I'll go ahead and start. Whereas every day 100 Americans are killed by gun violence, on an average there are nearly 13,000 gun homicides every year. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to be killed with guns than people in other high-income countries. And whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens go hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories, and whereas council members and law enforcement officers know their communities best and are best positioned to understand how to help keep their citizens safe, and whereas to help honor Hadiya Pendleton, a teenager who marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade and was tragically shot and killed just weeks later, as well as the 100 Americans whose lives are cut short and the countless survivors who are injured by shootings every day, a national coalition of organizations has designated June 7th, 2019, the first Friday in June, as the 5th National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And whereas anyone can join this campaign by pledging to wear orange on June 7th, the first Friday in June in 2019, to help raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors. Now therefore be it resolved that the mayor of the town of Truckee declares the first Friday in June, June 7, 2019, to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day, and encourages all citizens to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Great, thank you. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Truckee North Tahoe Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America group, we're thrilled to accept this proclamation. And we appreciate your support with taking actions to reduce gun violence locally as part of a national effort. And then to celebrate National Gun Violence Awareness Day here in Truckee, we are going to have a picnic on Friday, June 7th at the regional park at the rodeo barbecue area near the playground. And we invite you to join us. It's a family-friendly event. And there we will honor the victims of gun violence, discuss how we can work together to reduce gun violence in all its forms, and celebrate how far we've come so far. So I hope to see you there. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, our final proclamation this evening, but I don't think our final presentation, just our final proclamation, has to do with recognizing Building Safety Month 2019. This proclamation was actually already, I think, offered to the building department, and I don't believe there's any representative here this evening. But maybe I'll just quickly read some of the highlights. First, whereas the town of Truckee is committed to recognizing our growth and strength, depends on the safety and economic value of the homes, buildings, and infrastructure that serve our citizens, both in everyday life and in times of natural disaster. And basically, it goes on to say, I won't necessarily read the entire thing, but it goes on to underscore the importance of building safety. Another perhaps worthy quote here, or worthy mention, is that Building Safety Month 2019 encourages appropriate steps everyone can take to ensure the safety of our built environment and recognizes that the implementation of safety codes by local and state agencies has saved lives and protected homes and businesses. So we will send this back to Building Department for prominent display. So thank you. Okay, with that, we've got some introductions of new employees this evening, and I believe, Judy, you're going to introduce Dara Johnston and Caitlin Brennan.
Yes, I am. Thank you. So, Caitlin and Dara are right here in front of me. Caitlin is our new office assistant. She's replacing Julie Paving, and we recruited her from, did he leave yet? Clear Capital? So she's a graduate from Santa Cruz, and she spent some time at the Monterey Bay Aquarium working at a program with seals, I believe. Sea otters or seals? Seals. Oh, sea otters, thank you. And Caitlin's been living in the area for 5 years and has just moved to Truckee in the last 2. She lives with her husband, Matt, and they have a couple of dogs. They have a hound shepherd that they picked up from the Humane Society, correct? Yes. And a pit bull mix. Her favorite things to do in Tahoe are backpacking and hiking and mountain biking and spending time at the lake. And don't hold anything against her, all you other fans, but she's a Golden State Warrior fan and an Oakland Athletics fan. We want to welcome her. She's already been doing a great amount of work with our scanning and indexing of all the Laserfiche documents that you all can access online. So Dara Johnston is our new administrative technician, and she's replacing Kelly Larson. And she's also from Clear Capital. They're a great training ground for the town of Truckee, just saying. So Dara grew up in Moab and left there briefly to go to college, went back to Utah, and then moved out here with her husband and their children when he got a job in the ski industry here in Truckee. They lived in Reno and have just moved up to Truckee in 2013. Excuse me. They have 3 daughters that go to school at the Donner Trail Elementary School and at the Alder Creek Middle School. And their favorite season in Truckee is summer, and they like to camp with their family and spend time with Donner Lake. They like music in the park and Truckee Thursdays. And we want to thank Dara for coming too. She's also been a great addition to the clerk's office. Thanks.
Well, welcome Dara and Caitlin, and congratulations. And it's a good thing Clear Capital is only a stone's throw away, because easy to walk down here, and also glad to hear they hire only nice people. And it's very clear that you're both very nice people. So, okay. And by the way, we're going to have an opportunity for both council comment and public comment after all of the presentations. And one other thing I failed to mention at the start of our presentations is that we are moving one of the items. 7.1 was actually supposed to be a presentation, not a discussion item. As the council probably noted, there was a blank page there. So we were going to move item 7.1 to its proper location under the presentation bracket, and that'll be the last presentation this evening. So with that, Jeff Lux, you have some employee incentive awards to announce.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had an all-employee quarterly meeting on May 2nd, which is something we do every quarter, and it's always a lot of fun. And we had great participation again out at the new courtyard, or the not so new courtyard at this point. And I've got 5 specifics. I'll kind of be fairly brief on these, but 5 specific awards. The first is just a recognition of some recent, either about to or just retirements for long-term employees of the town. Ron Tucker from Public Works, Dan Olson from Police, and Alan McKay from Police. And just wanted to acknowledge them. They'll have separate, either have had or will have separate ceremonies for them. The incentive awards, there were 4 of them, and they're quite diverse. They're pretty interesting, I think. The first is to Jillian Greenberg, and we tend to give specific kind of attributes to those awards based on the Truckee staff values, which is a value statement. And for Jillian, it was teamwork, commitment, and excellence. And while Jillian has done many, many things for the town in the areas of sustainability, in recycling, in solid waste, and also in energy, this particular award is her invaluable efforts to reach the underserved Spanish-speaking population, which is 1/5 of our total population here in Truckee, and make good on our promise to deeply engage the Spanish-speaking population in the general plan update process and other town processes. A recent Spanish housing workshop was a great example of this, was a huge milestone in the road to building bridges of trust, respect, inclusivity, and civic engagement in every segment of our community. Danielle, planners, Erica, and others were there, but it's certainly a great deal of credit goes to Jillian and her abilities to speak 2 languages, and also her willingness to go out kind of outside the lane and do exciting work in many fields. The second award is for Brad Beers and his attributes excellence and commitment. Brad Beers with Police Department is always outstanding performance as the school resource officer, but this is specifically for his efforts in organizing the Truckee Police versus the Truckee High School basketball game that occurred on April 18th. I wish I'd have seen it. This annual game was going to be passed over this year due to the high number of snow days and other issues, but due to the organizational efforts of Officer Beers, we were able to have the fundraising game. The game was attended by many Truckee police officers that volunteered their time and efforts, as well as officers from the Truckee CHP. This is just another example of Officer Beers' desire to promote good relations between area youth and Truckee police and go above and beyond the call of traditional duty. The third award is for Yumi Don, Associate Planner with Planning, and Commitment and Excellence are the categories here. For the past several years, providing housing for locals has been a community and council high priority. Increasing availability of housing through policy development, prioritizing resources, identifying new funding sources, and regional collaboration is not an easy task, and balancing this work with other planning priorities and application priorities is even more challenging. Yumi's efforts to further housing go beyond the council directive work assignments and highlight how her passion, dedication, and creativity can excel in community building. Yumi's ability to balance multiple interest timelines and priorities have resulted in tangible improvements. For example, Coburn Crossing was one of her major efforts, 138 rental apartments being built as we speak, the first of its kind in more than a decade. Traffic and impact facility fees now based on square footage, so to provide incentives to smaller units. A seemingly modest, but actually could be a very major accomplishment to try to provide affordable housing. Continued workforce housing and inclusionary housing requirements. The putting together of the funding efforts, possible funding efforts for housing, and now the polling, which is going on again as we speak, and many other efforts. Other efforts include the task of untangling Gray's Crossing, which we're in the middle of, the housing element, which we just went through a review of, and Mountain Housing Council work and developer coordination. So Yumi's efforts exemplify her excellence of going above and beyond in the housing arena. And finally, my final award is a kind of a broad team award for teamwork and excellence. And it went to a number of people, and they were recognized with a luncheon a while back. This included Public Works, Streets, Fleet and Facilities, and Police. And it was for their teamwork and excellence in getting through a very challenging winter and a particularly challenging February, which we all may remember. In a very, very heavy winter, the efforts and the great collaboration work between Public Works and Police and the different departments and divisions was exceptional and served us well. So those were the awards. We gave them out on May 2nd, and we give an incentive, a sort of a tangible, but modest but tangible incentive with those awards, and kind of a fun part of our job as staff.
Thank you, Jeff, and congratulations to all the recipients. I don't know if are any here this evening. Okay. Well, if you're watching on television, we congratulate you that way, and also wanted to just underscore the tremendous efforts of both Public Works and Police keeping our roads, clean and safe this past winter. Incredible job. All right, Kim, you are going to present the quarterly financial status update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will, and I'll keep it very brief because you all have been studying the budget diligently, and so you've seen a lot of this over the last few months. But I'm going to go through my normal three revenue sources that kind of give us an idea of what's going on economically within the community. The first is our property tax trend. We continue to have a nice, steady growth in property tax. We like seeing that. About 7% over 17-18 is where we think we're going to come in for this year and in June 30th. And then we've budgeted a 4% increase, as you saw in the budget cycle. Of course, as you know, we don't know or have really a very good idea of what that's going to be until the third week of July. And we'll be updating you then. Our sales tax continues to hold strong. The dip in 18-19, as I've described before, is really related to the state changing their system. And so there was some over-reporting in 17-18 made up for in 18-19. So we if you kind of look at the overall trend and ignore that 18-19, you can see the nice steady growth there. Some of the sectors that continue to be strong are building and construction, and then our restaurants and hotels. And you can also see this quarter that's presented right here, the restaurants and hotels. We had good snow over the Christmas holidays, and that always bodes well, as you will see in our TOT numbers, which are just really surging right now. So we year to date for TOT, we were at $3.5 million. That's just through March 31st, right? So if you look at last year, we're over the total for last year, and we're over the total for 16-17. Right now, we have in our estimated actuals on the budget that we'll present to you on June 11th, $3.9 million for this year. We could easily get to $4 million based on the strength that we're seeing. So it really speaks to how, once again, a great ski season. Summer continues to be strong, but that great ski season makes a really big difference in folks coming and staying in our community. And here's some quarterly information that I thought you might be interested in. So this is, remember, our first quarter is July to September. This is the fiscal year. So you can see the first bar was 16-17, 17-18, and then this last year, summer was very, very busy. I think we heard that a lot anecdotally around town. We did have a good October to December, again, pretty strong for the beginning of the ski season. And then you can see that 28.5% increase this last quarter that ended March 31. And then this last quarter we're in right now, it's our smallest quarter, usually the April to June time period. We'll see how that comes in about the end of July. We'll know that. Just some TOT compliance updates. We're pretty excited with our online payment opportunities. We have now about 70% of our individual owners remitting online. So that's great. We're saving about 500 paper filings a quarter. Yahoo! And that means we don't mail them out. They don't mail them back. It just really has streamlined things, and we really appreciate that Host Compliance created that interface, and it seems to be working really well for folks. As far as unit identification, we've got 1,570 rental units out in the town right now. We had about 1,100 identified back in October of 2016 before we started working with Host. And they have been able to identify 92% of all of the listings that they've found online, which is, as I've looked at other cities and towns, a very high identification rate. We continue to send out compliance letters, over 1,000 sent since we started that program with Host, 200, almost 300 this year. We do have 110 new registrations this year due to our follow-up letters, and we do have, unfortunately, 16 active liens with folks against folks' homes that have never responded to us with our multiple tries to get a hold of them for continuing to rent but not registering and reporting to the town. To change subjects really quickly, we've started working on a bond issuance for the courtyard garages that you all approved a month or so ago. So we are currently working on the preliminary official statement. We will have a public hearing with the council on June 25th. Chrissy and I will be traveling down to San Francisco in July to talk to the folks from Standard & Poor's and hopefully maintaining our very strong credit rating. And we anticipate a bond sale in August. So that process is going on in the background, and we'll bring it all to you for approval to move forward officially in June. And that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Kim. I think what we'll do is we'll pause here, open this up for council questions, comments, since we've had 6 presentation items. And then I understand the next item, the aquatic invasive species, probably a bit involved, and then we can come back and also ask questions or have comments after that as well. And so with that, why don't we open it up for any council questions or comments on any of the presentations we've heard? Nope. Okay.
Well, Kim, thank you very much for this. It's always really encouraging to see the numbers coming in, and I love how you slice and dice the data, so thank you. But I did want to just make a statement about the proclamation to end gun violence. I'm just very grateful for the opportunity to have this come before us, and the tragic events that our countries and others have endured from gun violence has drastically changed the way we live. I see it so much in our schools. And so I just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing towards this goal.
Thank you, Anna. And I'll second that. Any other questions, comments on any of the presentations? Kim, just one quick question on the TOT, the bars, kind of the trending upwards. And were you saying that we're already exceeding some of the past years, and we're only in May right now? Is that what you're?
Yes, we are already exceeding the past years, and that's just through because we folks report and remit quarterly. We don't have monthly or daily information. We only have quarterly information. Right. So what I was reporting was just through the 31st of March.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, with that, we will open the first 6 presentations to public comment. If there's any public comment on any of the presentations this evening, please step forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment, and we'll go to our last presentation item this evening, originally billed as item 7.1, but we're now going to call it item 5.7 instead. So, Devery.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Let me pull up the presentation for you. All right. So a brief overview, we did start the Aquatic Invasive Species Program, as I refer to as AIS, in 2014. In the past years, the program was funded on 3 grants. We had 1 by the Truckee River Fund and 2 from the Division of Boating and Waterways, DBW. Those all 3 have since expired. The grants covered the costs associated with watercraft inspection staff, education and outreach, early detection monitoring. So that was, I did at least once. We tried for twice monitoring. We usually do it in the fall to see if they had any veligers, which is the smaller animal of the quagga mussels and the zebra mussels. So we'd actually go out one time with our state scientists, our regional scientists, and then Dan and I have done some testing in the past with our community partners. The last grant that we had was pretty substantial. It was $400,000. It included $200,000 for operation costs for what I've listed here, including administrative reporting. And it also included money to fund the construction for a semi-permanent watercraft inspection site. We, due to zoning of land and kind of our land swap with the airport and community partners, we were unable to secure and obtain some land. So we did return those funds back to the state. And as I mentioned, all of these grants have expired as of December 31st of 2018. All of the grants are quagga and zebra mussel specific. That's the specific species that they're looking to make sure don't enter our water bodies, and they're preventative grants. Just so you have a look at the lake, Donner Lake has 3 boat launches. We have 2 of them are private, which includes the Tahoe Donner Marina and the Donner Lake Homeowners Association. So they're closed access, meaning that if their homeowners association staff isn't present, those ramps are shut. There's a gate across. You can't launch your boat or pull the boat off the water at that time. And then we have our public boat launch. It's one of our most commonly used ramps, and that is a non-controlled access point to the lake. So if their staff isn't there, or if it's off season in between past Labor Day all the way through Memorial Day, so end of September into May, there's no one there monitoring that lake. So people can go on and off as they please. So that's what these programs are kind of working towards, a closed access, so we know who's going on and off the lake, and make sure and ensuring that they've all been inspected. Here is an overview of the program costs. Now, these station operations, there's such a large range from $90,000 to $145,000 because it's dependent on the number of vessels that are inspected per that year. So this can vary depending on if Boca and Stampede, for example, are full, we might have more Reno boaters going there. If those lakes you can't launch on, we'll have more boaters at Donner Lake. We had all intentions of applying for another grant in 2018. They used to come available every year. However, in 2018, there wasn't one that opened. What happened, it was supposed to open in April. It was pushed to October. And then it was once more postponed until April of this year, with the money not being awarded until and available for use until October of this year. So that's after our boating season. And with the changes of the opening of the grant this year, the Division of Boating and Waterways separated the grants. No longer one grant for operations. There's 2. So it changed the requirements, and unfortunately we no longer meet those requirements. The first grant is available to agencies who are looking to update their prevention plan for would be how they run their program. Like, is it a sticker program to get inspected to be able to launch on the lake? Is it a sealing program like Tahoe has? Is there gates on the lake, or on the ramps? And so the first grant is purely just as a study to understand how you can run the program. The second grant available to agencies is the actual operations grant. And in order to apply for the operations grant, you have to have a current prevention plan. Ours is outdated, and the plan to be up to date also has to have written approval from the state saying that it meets their requirements. So that changed, unfortunately, this year. Let's see here. This is the first year that our program is unfunded. We have worked very closely with our partners, one of them being Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, that's TRPA. They have generously agreed to help fund the program this year. So with that, they will be funding all the operation costs from Tahoe Resource Conservation District. It's their staff that actually runs the inspection out on the tarmac that you guys see at the airport. So they'll be funding those costs and the overhead. We have the town is going to pay for the inspection stickers, and we're going to help offset the park and rec fee for their staff. We're going to fund the additional hours. So we have staffing from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week, from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So we're going to help offset those. And let's see, and we will pay for the water testing of this year, it's a pretty minimal cost compared to everything else. So to the end user, which is nice, to the boaters, the program is the same. The fee structure for this program is the same. Their inspection process is the same. Nothing looks different for them. And then our inspection station is open. It opened on May 20th. It will be open through Labor Day weekend and operates daily from 8:30 to 5:30. And I'm going to hand it off to Chief to talk about our next steps with the program.
So let me go back just a sec to what Deborah was talking about with regards to the grant and some of the requirements that were changed. I think one of the first things that we recognized when we took this program over, that our Achilles heel was the fact that our program in Truckee was 100% funded by the grant. Meaning if anything ever happened to that, if it became more competitive, if for some reason Truckee or Donner Lake was not deemed a at-risk waterway, we really would lose the program entirely. And there's a second component to this that is, we were just focused on the quagga and zebra mussels, which was specific to the grant, when in reality we need to be looking at this more holistically as aquatic invasive species. We all know that we already have some invasive species in the lake. I mean, crawdads, we love them, but they're a aquatic invasive species, and there's a variety of foils and weeds that also need to be considered really for the long-term health of the lake. So from that perspective, I think we really need to look at this challenge as an opportunity. I know that's a generic statement, but we need to somehow come up with a way of stabilizing the program financially, and one of the ways to do that is with the fee structure. The revenues that the inspections generate will eventually pay for the program to some degree, but we need to work with TRP and TRCD and the boating community to make that happen, and that's kind of our next big hurdle to get over. I think everybody in the police department, the town government-wise, acknowledges this is an important program to have. The threat of the quagga mussel and zebra mussel is not going away anytime soon. It's spreading all throughout California. We are at the lower end of that risk scale, but that doesn't mean we need to be complacent to it. And I think that really through having community partners, the rec district, TRPA, TRCD, the town, all working together to develop the program more towards AIS, stabilizing the finances of it, not having to rely on the grants, and work towards some full-time inspection stations, we can continue to keep the program running for years to come. But from where I sit at this point, and working with Boating and Waterways and watching Devery work with Boating and Waterways over the last year, I don't think that the grant funding is the appropriate path forward. So we still have a lot of conversation to come. We're going to be meeting with TRP and TRCD in late June, talking about next year. So although things are stabilized for this boating season, we obviously are still optimistic, but concerned about what the following year has to bring with the financial implications. So with that, we'll open it up to council for any questions that you have specific to where we sit today.
All right. Thank you, Devery. Thank you, Chief. Any questions from council? Yeah.
Thanks to both of you. It seems like I would just want to say I'm very glad that we are sort of stepping forward to take this on. I think it is the right thing to do for the town. Curious if you could ballpark the staff time between the two of you and Dan that's gone into this, even just in the past year, which I assume is outside of any grant or fee funding.
Yeah, to some degree. I'll let Divert answer specifically to the amount of hours she puts in. So much of it is just it's not really tangible. It's not really recorded, but there's a good 80 hours of negotiation alone with just the grant, and I'd put it 100 to 150 hours of miscellaneous management of the program beyond that.
Thank you.
Dave? Sort of process question. So do we do all the inspections out here? So do we have somebody stationed at the Donner Public Boat Ramp and then they turn people away? There are no actual inspections happening there, or there are?
Correct. So all the inspections take place on the tarmac. Right. We have the rec department staff who staffs the boat launch, and they will turn people away if they don't have a current inspection sticker, and they'll have to come back to the airport.
Oh, yeah, that's good to know. And then you spoke a little bit about our prevention plan being outdated. Where's that fit in this whole mess? And who's kind of responsible? Is that the Rec and Park districts? Is that like a water board?
No, that's all us.
That's us. Yeah. Wow.
So the last one was 2000.
I learn new things every day around here.
And it's the police department. I'm still quandering over that one. But so 2011 was the last prevention plan that was written up, and the whole world around aquatic invasive species, but specific to quagga and zebra mussels, has changed since that point. The way that would work is through the Boating and Waterways grant. We would have to apply for a grant to update the prevention plan, have the plan updated in one calendar year boating season, and then come back and apply for a grant for the operation costs. So if we were to do that, we already missed the cycle for this next year. It would be the following year. We're out 2 or 3 years, back to the analogy that we just don't think that the grant is a sustainable way. Some other complexities with that grant, just to make sure that our prevention plan, although we might do one, it wouldn't be through the grant. They're becoming more and more competitive, and so these at-risk waterways that have certain calcium levels, alkaline levels, boating populations, it's the Delta, it's warmer bodyways, Lake Mead, they're becoming so competitive for the grant funds that are out there, and there's just not a ton of money in that program to begin with, that regardless of whether we updated that prevention plan through Boating and Waterways, at some point in the future, it might be after all of us, somebody's going to be struggling with not having that grant funding available to them. I don't think that the risk to Donner is high enough from what we're getting from the scientific community as to keep us in that competitive grant cycle long term. Might be for a couple years, we might be able to get a prevention plan out of it, but we likely wouldn't be able to have that grant funding for, call it, 5 to 10 years from now.
And if we were to do that, that's something you'd be outsourcing, I'm assuming, a prevention plan for the lake, or do we have that expertise in-house?
Yeah, no, I would probably go through the Boating and Waterways. If we had to update, we don't have the expertise in-house. If we had to update,
talented department chief, if you do.
No. Although scuba diving, I might be able to work that in the job description somehow. I think that at that point, if we felt the prevention plan was necessary, we would apply for the Boating Waterway grant. I think that's avoidable by just bringing together the community partners to establish what I call a closed circuit. It's probably the wrong terminology, but it's really getting to the public boat launch and stopping access off season so that we're sure that everybody who puts a boat on the water has been inspected. I mean, that's the key. If you have that, you really don't need the prevention plan.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. We've got coverage from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. I see boats out there in the summer at 5 a.m. So does the staff at that boat launch, do they check to see that the boats coming off the water have stickers and have any impact on that?
Yeah, so from Memorial Day to Labor Day, they catch that occasionally if they're coming off enough. But if it's a low snow year, you don't have any verification.
They're on the water all winter long.
Right, and
except for this year.
Really, checking them coming off the lake doesn't do you a lot of good. Both the quagga and the zebra mussels specifically are really they infect lakes through the ballasts of the boats, and so once it gets in there and water mixes with them and they're flushed out of the boat system, they're in the lake.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just education, most likely, and making sure people understand that they just violated a law that has an importance.
Yeah, two years ago, we worked with Rec and Park District to subsidize their staffing costs for the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week between Memorial Day and Labor Day. That wasn't ideal, but that was the best that we could do at the time because we don't control the boat launch.
Right.
Ideally, through technology, through collaboration with the boating community, a gate is the best alternative, right? And that doesn't mean closed access. We can still provide 24/7 access 12 months a year through apps, technology, key cards, rolling codes that you get through apps. You know, we've all signed up for something and they send that authorization code to your iPhone. I mean, all that technology is out there, but we have to get to the point where that circuit doesn't require a person to be standing there because that's where we're running into the glitch. It's not financially sustainable to hire somebody 12 months out of the year to stand in the snow and watch no one some months and then watch minimal people other months.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thanks again, Chief and Deborah. Any other council?
Just following up on what Anna said about educating, is there signage up at the boat ramps that's pretty clear stating that you do, for the protection of the lake, you do need to have?
We have signs there. There's signs leading in on Donner Pass Road as you're coming from downtown, I guess, coming through on the east end. Yeah, Coldstream. And then we also have them on the Donner Lake exit as well, coming down that main road with boater information. We've reached out to the scales and they have information for boaters as well, coming depending on what water body they plan on launching their boat. So they have information. We have representatives from Tahoe Resource Conservation District at Truckee Thursdays. Not every single one, but they are there at a handful, talking to community members and just giving the education that we can.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll open this up for public comment. Any public comment? All right, we'll close public comment, and thank you again for the update. I think with that, we're ready to move to the consent calendar, and we have another slight change here. Item 7.2, which was originally billed as a discussion item, was intended to be on the consent calendar. It's a quarterly report that's in our packet. So we're going to be moving item 7.2, which is the Truckee Chamber Integrated Marketing and Communications Plan Quarterly Update, to the consent calendar. And always the opportunity there to, pull an item for discussion if anyone cares to do so. So with that, walk us through the consent calendar items. Item 6.1, minutes of the May 14 and May 16 budget workshop. 6.2, Treasurer's Report for January through March 2019. Item 6.3 is the Downtown Parking District Analysis and Strategic Plan Project Contract Award to Dixon Resources Unlimited. Item 6.4, Acceptance of the Transit Audit Report for Fiscal Year 2017-18. 6.5, Selection of a Member to serve on the Truckee Tahoe Airport Land Use Commission. Item 6.6, authorize a contract amendment of $35,000 with consultant Richard Blair for fiscal year 2018-19. Item 6.7, environmental enhancement and mitigation program grant for Mcgary Divert open space project. And again, we're going to move 7.2 up, and we can call that one 6.8 now, the Truckee Chamber Integrated Marketing and Communications Plan Quarterly Report. Any member of council care to have an item pulled for discussion?
Not pulling, but I just want to note a public comment for 6.3 that I want to make sure gets included in the record.
Okay. You want to go ahead?
Sorry, the public comment was from Ralph Godon talking about long length vehicles and diagonal parking as being an issue that we should include in that study.
Okay. Thank you, Morgan. I think I saw a written comment, I believe, email from Rolf. Thank you for that. Any other member account? Anything else? Okay. Any member of staff care to pull an item? member of the public? Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move the consent calendar.
Thank you, Morgan.
Second.
Thank you, Jessica. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, consent calendar carries. And let's see, with all of the shuffling, where does that leave us now? 7.3 is our start off item on the agenda for discussion. And wow, we're making good progress here. That's public hearing parcel charges for town special service areas, otherwise known as TSSAs, and permanent road divisions. So Todd, looks like you're queued up.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. So I'm here this evening to present the public hearing on parcel charges for town special service areas, TSSAs, and permanent road divisions, PRDs. I think I am. Oh, there we go. So the purpose of tonight's public hearing is to accept public input concerning parcel charges for all TSSAs and PRDs in the town of Truckee, to discuss the allowable uses of the TSSA funds, and to adopt a resolution that would set the charge amounts for the upcoming fiscal year 2019-2020. As far as the fiscal impact, there's currently two TSSA areas in town, TSSA 1 and TSSA 5, that we collect parcel charges on. TSSA 1 is the Tahoe Donner neighborhood. We currently collect $70 for undeveloped parcels and $95 for developed parcels. In Glenshire, Devonshire, it's $23 and $115 respectively, and then for Cambridge Estates, it's $84 and $176 respectively. What this means is the parcel charges bring in an annual revenue of approximately nearly $597,000 for TSSA 1 Tahoe Donner, and then just over $179,000 for the Glenshire Devonshire TSSA 5. So in the upcoming fiscal year for TSSA 1, the Tahoe Donner area, we expect to use the TSSA funds for continued enhanced roadway maintenance for the roadways in Tahoe Donner. So for a portion of the 2019-2020 Slurry Seal project, as well as the 2020 paving and drainage projects. We also have some miscellaneous projects we're working on, including the study that was described in the staff report, where we're looking at parking improvements along Donner Pass Road in the vicinity of the Tahoe Donner Beach Marina and the Donner Memorial State Park. So we've actually commissioned a study that's nearly complete, and we actually have a meeting next Thursday with California State Parks and Tahoe Donner to discuss some of the findings and maybe what our next steps might be. So that's exciting. So our recommendations this year for TSSA 1 would be to continue to collect parcel charges in Tahoe Donner at their current levels, that the funds continue to be eligible for their existing eligible uses such as roadway drainage, trails, enhanced snow removal, and parking related projects. And council, our recommendation is for council to approve an additional eligible use of TSSA 1 funds to include design and construction of Pioneer Trail Bridge Street Extension project. And this was at the request of the Tahoe Donner Association. We had sent them a letter, and they responded with their own letter to the town council, where they recommended that the town make that project an eligible use, with the thinking being that it would provide better access, especially in the cases of emergency, for egress leaving the Tahoe Donner subdivision. So, and then staff concurs with that recommendation. Moving over to TSSA 5 funds, in the upcoming fiscal year, we have projects that are budgeted in the form of the 2019 and 2020 Slurry Seal projects, as well as the 2020 paving and drainage project. Our recommendations for TSSA 5 would be to maintain the parcel charges at their current levels for Glenshire, Devonshire, that the funds continue to be eligible for roadway and drainage and trail projects and parking related projects. And then we would recommend council approve the additional eligible use of TSSA 5 funds for transit service. And this was actually something that the town we asked the board if they would be interested in adding transit as a eligible use, given the fact that the town anticipates some additional funding in the upcoming year or two from Nevada County Transportation Commission. And we thought if any of the areas were interested in enhanced or expanded transit service, we could use some of our additional funds to supplement TSSA funds. And the board, actually went to the HOA meeting, and the board voted unanimously to add transit or recommend to the town council that they approve it as an additional eligible use of TSA funds. All the other TSSAs and PRDs in town have had zero since the town incorporated as far as a parcel charge. So we recommend that zero would be continued into the next fiscal year for the following TSSAs. And then in closing, the recommendation would be to conduct a public hearing on the town special service areas, TSSAs, and permanent road divisions, PRDs, to approve the additional eligible uses of TSSA 1 funds to include design and construction of the Pioneer Trail Bridge Street Extension Project, and then to approve the additional eligible use of TSSA 5 funds to include transit service, and to adopt the resolution 2019-16 setting assessments for the 2019-2020 fiscal year.
Yeah, and I'll just add a historical comment. So these TSSA funds were originally established by Nevada County prior to the town incorporating. At the time, they were called county service areas, and they were primarily as the county recognized the cost of maintaining roads up here in Truckee being significantly higher than in most of the roads in Western County. It was a prerequisite to create a new subdivision from about the mid-1970s on, that these county service areas also be created. So after the town incorporated, what we had going on was areas of town where, like the west end of Donner Lake, an older part of town, Sierra Meadows being another older part of town, where 100% of the road maintenance was coming from the general fund. And then we had other pockets, some of them large, like Tahoe, Donner, and Glenshire, but some of the smaller ones, like Olympic Heights and the Biltz Tract, where property owners were paying additional funds towards roadway maintenance. And the town council in the late 90s, early 2000 timeframe made a decision that they wanted to basically establish an equal baseline level of road maintenance that was funded by the general fund throughout town, and that the special service areas would be used for enhanced levels of maintenance or other services that wouldn't otherwise be able to be provided by the general fund. So that's the evolution of these. Todd mentioned there's about 8 or 10 where the assessments are set at zero. When the town incorporated, they were assessed at a higher rate. But a lot of those are very small areas. Some of them may include like 20 or 30 parcels. And the practicality of providing an enhanced level of road maintenance on the frontage of 30 parcels, it didn't make a lot of sense as compared to the Tahoe Donner subdivision or the Glenshire subdivision. So the evolution of these went from providing basic road maintenance to providing enhanced road maintenance to now providing enhanced road maintenance plus some other things like trails, transit, potentially this third access road out of Tahoe Donner. So I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Todd. Any questions from council?
And that was good. The staff report was also very clear. But so I'm just trying to clarify, did you also go to the Tahoe Donner board with the transit recommendation as well, and they said no, right?
Correct. Yes, it was in the letter we sent them, and then staff did attend their board meeting.
Right. So you as the council make the final determination. So the Tahoe Donner board.
Be my second question, but thank you, Dan.
Right. Sorry to jump ahead of you.
No.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess that was my second question. My third question is, did you get an impression that they
Excuse me, Dave, do we need to, I think we have a technical issue and we're getting a signal to take 5 here.
It's too hot for everybody. I was wondering. I couldn't hear myself like I normally do. Is that better? I won't touch it. I never touch any of the things you give me up here. But trust me.
We got a hot mic here.
Yeah. I never touch it. Did you catch that the second part? I guess, did they not see the connection between potentially enhanced transit from Tahoe Donner to also potentially helping their parking conundrum that they're trying to improve that they do want to fund?
The answer is yes, I believe, although I will say that the staff at the Tahoe Donner Association has told us that they have in the past run association shuttles from the clubhouse to the beach with somewhat limited success. And they think it's due to the amount of stuff that people like to bring to the beach with them, to load it into a car, bring it to the clubhouse, transfer to a bus, catch a ride down there, unload it, that folks would rather kind of jockey for a parking space or not use the bus and go somewhere else is what they've told us the experience has been there.
So, and then just to know I'm really loud. So. So we can add that.
Yeah, so.
Nope. Want to take 1 minute here to address this, or?
So you kind of jumped to it, and I think you answered it, but that was, thank you. We don't want to touch your mic too much, but we can add that back in there should we feel it reasonable.
You could, and this TSSA fund process, it's really a 2-step process where step 1 is to set the assessments, and over the life of the town, the assessments have been the exact same as they were when they were established back in the 70s when the subdivisions were created, because they can't be increased. There was no inflationary adjustment built in at the time. To increase them would require going back through a vote of the people being assessed. So historically, they've just been maintained at the current level. So that's what tonight's about.
That being said, though, the revenues have slowly increased over time as undeveloped lots convert to developed lots. So we have seen a steady increase over time.
Yep. So, step 1 of the TSSA, of the use of TSSA funds, is to hold this public hearing and identify what the eligible uses of the funds are going forward. Step 2 is a future decision to budget those funds for one purpose or another. So, if the council were to make the funds available for transit, it doesn't mean that you're saying we're spending the money on it. You're just creating that flexibility in the future. So.
And then how long would those assignments last? Is this just an annual? Do we do this every year?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Jessica, any? Okay. Anna or Morgan?
Yeah, I have a couple. Thanks for addressing all of my questions ahead of time. It is very interesting to learn about these things and the history behind them, because when you look at it, it's pretty amazing that there hasn't been any increase or inflationary application to these fees, although there are 700 more lots in Tahoe Donner, so that will convert and generate more funds. I'm very interested in at least creating the flexibility potentially there for creating some other options. So thanks for asking those questions, Dave. The vote would require a simple majority to change the rates of either of these TTSAs. Is that correct?
I'll look to Andy on that. I think you'd be creating effectively a new assessment district in all likelihood.
Yeah, if it's an assessment district, then it's weighted. It's a weighted majority. If you were to do it as a tax, then it depends on if you were to earmark it for maintenance or just have it go into the general fund.
Okay. All right. I'll save the rest for discussion.
Just so we're all clear, for the Pioneer Trail Bridge Street Extension Project, that's the third access road to Tahoe Donner?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, and interesting thing to me on that, about 12 years ago, as staff, we had suggested to the Tahoe Donner Association and the Town Council that making that project eligible for those funds we thought was a good idea at the time. At that time, the Tahoe Donner Association disagreed with that, and ultimately they were pretty vocal about it, and so that never occurred. And so it's interesting how times change, where at this point in time the association is seeing that as a priority. So.
Just curious, the alignment of that road, trying to visualize what, would that be parallel to the trail?
It would pretty much
Roughly.
be, yeah. So, yeah.
Essentially, okay.
Yeah, Pioneer Trail extended to the west.
Okay.
Into Tahoe Donner.
All right. And Dan, I appreciated your history behind the TSSAs, and I think I sort of remember a little bit of this from last year. So if really these were driven by the HOAs sort of coming to the town or requesting the enhanced services? Is that?
So a number of them were a requirement. So the county put a requirement on the landowner at the time that they create a CSA as a condition of getting a subdivision approved. The Tahoe Donner, the one in Tahoe Donner, is an exception in that one was created after the subdivision had been approved through requests of the homeowners association. And it was in a different time as it relates to when you could create these special assessments in terms of whether a public vote was required or not. So it was a simpler time in terms of creating these kinds of assessments where a public vote wasn't required.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Any other council questions, clarifying?
I'm sorry, I did come up with one more.
Sure.
There is funds still remaining or projected for TSSA 5 for the Phase 3 trails. What's that going to go towards?
So there's, is there a specific page of the staff report that you're looking at?
I'm looking for, it's like $65,000. Yeah, here it is. Truckee River Trail Phase 3. Shoot, maybe not on that one. There's still just some funds remaining, and when I asked you the question ahead of time, what was left to do, and you said there's nothing, but there's still funds.
I think there was just some environmental monitoring. $4,000 a year is what we had in there.
Okay.
It was just some follow-up from the construction. There was like a 5-year monitoring requirement or something.
Right. So there is a page in the engineer's report that shows an expected expenditure out of the TSSA account for that trail.
Mm-hmm.
And that expenditure is what Todd was referring to. It's some monitoring work associated with some wetland restoration that we had to do. Beyond that, we're not currently anticipating additional Legacy Trail Phase 3 expenditures, although the language in the TSSA resolution would continue to make trails an eligible expenditure going forward, because there's other trail projects in the vicinity of the Glenshire subdivision that potentially could benefit from the use of these funds.
Great, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. All right, seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment and bring this back to council for discussion, deliberations. Who would like to start?
I'll jump in. I I would at least like to build in the flexibility to include transit into the TSSA 1 for Tahoe Donner. Again, putting my carbon emissions reduction focus on, I think that that's something that we need to do in order to create more opportunities. I'm really looking forward to the report on the Tahoe Donner Beach parking. That is kind of a pain point for me because I drive by it multiple times a day, and it's a real safety issue. I was talking with town manager about this, but at any given day, you've got people parking in any direction. People getting out of their cars with little kids and dogs and paddle boards and chairs and cyclists coming by and traffic. So we really could improve upon that. I'm very excited to see the focus and the interest in that. And I'm just curious as to the next step being actually taking either that feasibility study and potentially some funding for the Bridge Street Pioneer Center connection to, we would do an RFP process for taking those to the next step. Is that correct?
Most likely, we would do an RFP process and then hire a design consultant to start the preliminary design and planning of it.
So at this point, with the Tahoe Donner Beach Club parking area, that's really just a feasibility study. We don't even have like preliminary design solutions.
No, we don't have a preferred solution yet. So one of the options, for example, was to construct an off-street parking lot on State Park's property.
Hence the discussions
coming up where we want to kind of take their temperature and see if they're even willing to consider that. They may say, no, we don't want any new construction on our property, but do whatever you want in your right-of-way. And then if we did improvements in the right-of-way, it could mean, angle parking that was formalized, but then you have issues with vehicles backing out into the bike lane.
Yeah.
You could also look at parallel parking, which would be safer for bicyclists, but then you lose about 2 spaces for every one parallel space you put in that takes up 3 angle spaces. But there's other options like that we were studying, so we're trying to figure out maybe what are some of the options, what the best solution might be, and then we would be consulting with the state parks and the Tahoe Donner staff and trying to come up with what we think would be, a feasible solution there. That would be better than what's there now.
Okay. And just incidentally, there is also this piece about the Tahoe Donner asking for mowing, and I agree with staff's recommendation. Let's see what it looks like this summer and assess it from there. But it sounds like that the description is flexible enough that could be included if we saw a need for that this summer.
Yeah, we believe that's already an eligible use. Mm-hmm. It's really roadway maintenance, so if we did have to do some mowing of grass along the shoulder, we think that could be done without changing the eligible uses for TSA 1 funds.
Okay, great. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah. I would echo that. I think that council taking the step of at least approving transit as a use makes a lot of sense as a first step in a conversation to let them know where we are. I also think the fairness of having those uses become similar between Glenshire and Tahoe Donner makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, I think everything's pretty straightforward here.
Yeah, I'm not opposed as well to allowing the funds also be used for transportation. It landed on me as if Tahoe Donner's kind of already tried that and it didn't work. I'm not closed off to that, but I also feel like it is important to honor the peace of mind of the residents of Tahoe Donner. And then the way it's been landing on me recently, hearing a lot of the concerns about how is Tahoe Donner going to evacuate, what are the ways out, and whether whether that's accurate or inaccurate or true or not true, to me is irrelevant. It's more about the peace of mind of the people who live there. And if it's really going to have an impact or help with Truckee's largest neighborhoods, overall peace of mind to start on this study, then I'm going to be in support of that as well, especially if we're just running an empty bus from the clubhouse to the beach, if they're saying they've already been there, done that, and it hasn't worked. So I think if we're going to, does that make sense? So I'm saying to be flexible, yes, but I would like to have a strong sense of confidence that if the money is actually going to be going towards transit, that it's going to be utilized and be really efficient, and that otherwise I'm not opposed at all. You know, it's the neighborhoods themselves are paying into these funds, and so I really trust that they're voting who their boards are and who their leaders are, and that if they're coming back and saying this is how we want to spend that money, that deserves some attention.
Can I just clarify my point there? Because I'm certainly not intending to say, let's force them to run a shuttle down to the beach and back. Like, I think this is a first step in the conversation to say, hey, if you were going to use some of this for transit, what would you want? Maybe it's the Truckee Thursday shuttles. Maybe it's some other service that we haven't created yet.
Sure.
I see this as a first step in that conversation, and maybe the answer is 0. But at least we're creating that possibility.
Right. No, and that's where I agree that keeping it flexible and allowing. And how does it work, if I can ask a question, if we approve the use of funds for either or options, then who determines how they're spent or what the money goes to?
Ultimately, the town council through our budget process.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm aligned overall.
Is this out of line with our budget process? Because if we make changes, but we've already kind of set the budget, I guess I'm a little confused on how all this lines up a little bit.
It would be for next year's moving forward. So basically, after July 1st of this year, it would be an eligible use, and then it could be programmed into the 1920 budget or any year after that if it was deemed appropriate.
Okay. I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with what's already been said, and I'm generally in agreement. So,
as am I. I certainly am sensitive, and I hear what you're saying, Jessica, about respecting the board and where they want to take things. I also noted in our staff report that they weren't necessarily saying they're against transit. I mean, I think they're in favor of enhanced transit services to Tahoe Donner, but there was mention of potential additional funds coming our way that could help, facilitate that. Aside from this TSSA, at least that's what my read was. But certainly, I think it would be wise to have the flexibility to consider transit as sort of an eligible use for this particular TSSA. But again, I think it's got to be done in a way that's respectful and collaborative with the association ultimately when we get to that point. So I guess with that, let's see, we already did public comment. Any other thoughts or before we entertain a recommendation here or a motion? Okay.
So just a mechanical suggestion on the mechanics of if you wanted to include transit. The engineer's report that's attached to the staff report is the document that ultimately sets the eligible uses. So I think an appropriate action for the council, if you wanted to add transit as an eligible use, would be to approve the resolution, but also directing staff to make modifications to the engineer's report necessary to make transit an eligible use.
Okay. So,
that was
That sounds.
I would make the motion that we adopt Resolution 2019-16, citing assessments for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, and direct staff to update and modify the engineer's report to include transit as a TSSA 1 eligible use.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries as amended.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have item 7.4, Reimagine Bridge Street, the public outreach update, and authorization to proceed with the traffic signal design option. Jessica Thompson, I believe you're going to walk us through this, perhaps with Dan.
Yeah, a combination of the two of us.
And I hope you have some wonderful animation, visual graphics to present.
We do, and I'm actually going to check with you all in terms of how much of them you want to see, because I know you've seen some of them before. So we've got about 30 slides in this presentation, and I can either go through them very quickly or stop as asked. So I'm going to start out going quickly, and we'll take it, play it by ear from there.
See nodding heads.
Okay. So, and the council, I think it was in January or early February, saw a lot of this information, gave us authorization at that point to embark on a public outreach effort, which we have done. Really, our goal is to come back to you with the results of that public outreach effort, show you what it consisted of, and then also we're making a recommendation as to what the preferred option is to move forward. And our desire is to see if you agree with that or not. So the project area is Bridge Street, Commercial Row, Bridge Street, West River Street. The goals are to try to improve primarily pedestrian safety and circulation. Also, if there's an opportunity to improve traffic flow, that would be a good thing. And if we can create a quiet zone so that the train horn doesn't sound as often in downtown Truckee, that would be a good thing. And in the process, we don't want to damage any of our historic resources. There's a whole lot of other considerations in a project like this, how it affects regional traffic flow, cost, aesthetic, how it affects downtown parking, all the things that would come along with this kind of a public works project. We have the videos queued up, and you've seen these already, so I wasn't planning on playing them again unless you would like me to. These are videos of the existing intersection and people driving through it that the police department took using their drone technology. And this was a piece of the information that we provided on a website that we marketed to the public to gain information about the project. This is a schematic of the existing intersection. This is that video, which I'll try to skip past. Oops. Next. And I can go back to that. It's kind of entertaining to watch it, but it takes about a minute and a half. The alternatives that we really tested with the public are really four options. One is minor improvements, which is adding a median and some sidewalks, leaving the traffic handling identical to what it is today, a single lane roundabout, traffic signals, and closing the at-grade crossing are the four options that we communicated with the public on. The minor improvements basically just put a median in the middle of the road here, which then provides a better level of protection for pedestrians wanting to cross Bridge Street, and it adds a sidewalk on the east side of the road. This is a rendering of what that would look like. Again, here's the median and everything else about the intersection. So again, we're adding a median and a sidewalk. Everything else about the intersection is very similar to what it is today from a traffic standpoint. And then this is a rendering looking from the south to the north of that same improvement option. The traffic signal option, or excuse me, the roundabout option that we looked at was a single lane roundabout. That's all that could fit. We tried to fit in 2-lane roundabouts, and there just isn't enough space without damaging or modifying historic buildings. The other thing about the roundabout option is it would need to be a signalized roundabout. And the reason for that we've talked about before is to make sure that traffic would not get backed up onto the railroad tracks in a high traffic condition at the downtown intersections when a train was coming. So it wouldn't be the standard roundabout that we see in town. It would also have some traffic signal assistance for when trains come. This, again, is a rendering of what a roundabout would look like there with what the signals would look like. And this is that same rendering, but not the same rendering, but the same improvement option from looking from the south to the north. This is a simulation. Again, I'll try to, I'll move past this, but you saw this at your January meeting. One of the main things with the roundabouts is that when a train comes, they tend to plug up much more quickly than the traffic signal or the minor improvements because there aren't as many options to divert around the roundabout as there are with a signal or with the existing intersection configuration where you've got extra lanes. So you got one lane for people that want to wait, another lane for people that want to scoot past. This is a schematic of the traffic signal option. Of the options we looked at, this is the one that would require the least amount of widening unless we wanted to do this and put a median in anyway. The reason we might want to do that is the median would, from an aesthetic standpoint, when you're entering downtown, it would make that whole experience a bit different than it is today, and it would also provide an even higher level of crossing protection for pedestrians. So later in the staff report, when we come to the recommendation, which is that we should look at traffic signals in more detail, one of the things we would suggest is that we look at a traffic signal option both with a median and one without. And it's going to have cost implications, it'll have right-of-way implications. So we think that if we're going to look more seriously at a traffic signal, that looking at a couple of variations on what a traffic signal might be would be appropriate. And again, this is a rendering. This is the signal option with no median that we've put the renderings together for. And another one here. So, whoops, I kicked that into, try to move past. This is the information that I'm providing in the staff report is very similar to what was provided in the public presentations that we did. The renderings didn't get completed until we were partway through our public presentation effort. But all of these aerial traffic simulations were provided, as well as a overlying narrative of some of the key points with each option. And we got quite a lot of feedback on the website that we created. So that was encouraging, that we felt we captured quite a few people's attention, and quite a few people took time to respond. So that was a good thing. These are examples of some traffic signals that are out there. And then the final option that was considered was to just close Bridge Street and make it open, close it to vehicle traffic, make it open to pedestrians only. And that was a very interesting option in that it would by far be the least expensive of the options considered. It would create much more significant modification in regional traffic patterns, and it would likely, if we were to pursue this option, there would be a lot of dialogue necessary with the downtown business community. We heard some folks in the business community that were intrigued by this. We also heard a fair number of folks that kind of had an automatic kind of caution that came along with this option. I think caution of additional through traffic on West River Street and Commercial Row that would result from this kind of an option, and whether or not this might discourage people from coming to downtown. And I think there could be a lot of conversation and kind of a lot of opinions on both sides of that in terms of whether it would discourage or might it encourage. So this is, again, a rendering of what that could look like from looking from the north to the south. What you'll notice here is there's a chunk of asphalt in there. The notion is that you would maintain vehicular access to the gas stations, at least initially, with this kind of an option. And that's the reason for that chunk of asphalt is to maintain access to those existing driveways. And then from the south to the north, there's no driveways between the intersection and the railroad tracks, and that's an area that, if it were closed to vehicle traffic, could be embellished much more significantly upon. And then this was a simulation. One of the things you'll note with this option is we're showing a roundabout at the Mciver Crossing, West River Street intersection. One of the conclusions we came to is if you close Bridge Street, then we're going to see traffic diverted on West River Street and vice versa on Commercial Row, and it's going to add traffic to the existing Mciver Crossing, which would necessitate the addition of a roundabout here. An interesting point with this is that roundabout is envisioned as a part of our long-range transportation plan anyway, and if we were to close Bridge Street, it would just move the prioritization of that up significantly, but it's in all likelihood somewhere in our future, regardless of whether Bridge Street is open or closed. So the public outreach campaign that we embarked on, it was really two primary components. One was going to existing public meetings and sponsoring one of our own public meetings. That was one type of outreach where we brought the information out to groups or provided opportunity for groups or individuals to come and receive the information we had to provide. The other was the development of a website, and then a lot of some social media and some other outlets to try to drive activity to the website and drive attention to the website. So the website contained a lot of the information that we just skimmed through as a part of this presentation, and then it also included some a questionnaire at the end, or some survey information at the end, survey items at the end. And this table is a summary of the various meetings that we went to, and a summary of the preferred option that the participants at those meetings identified. So when we did one of these presentations, we would provide information about each of the four options, and then we would invite the folks who were in attendance at the meeting to basically put a sticker, and we handed them out, on which of the four options they thought made the most sense given the information that they had available. So the meetings we went to Noon Rotary, Truckee Downtown Merchants Association monthly meeting. We did it at one of our all-employee staff meetings here at Town Hall. We presented to the Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association, the BNI Business Group, Good Morning Truckee, and then we did a public workshop that was focused just on this project. All these other items we were kind of barging in on existing venues and offering all or a part of the program for that. And then the last one was, the main event was the workshop. The feedback we got from those events were that traffic signals were had the highest level of community support from the people that were there, followed by minor improvements, and then roundabouts were pretty consistently at the bottom, which was very interesting for a community that embraces roundabouts. I think the recognition of the additional complication that's created by the railroad tracks with the roundabouts was very, I think, informative, or very informative for people who were offering us their opinions. And then what was also interesting is the online survey. So of that, we got about 150 folks, through those meetings we went to, who offered their opinions. Again, signals being the most preferred, minor improvements being second, roadway reconfiguration third, roundabouts being at the bottom. And then we saw a fairly similar trend with the online survey tool. And that was interesting. Maybe it's not that surprising, because the information was very similar. It was being provided in both venues. but we got similar feedback that with the online survey tool, we got 300 to 350 responses, and over 50% were in favor of the signals, and then about 27% for minor improvements, and then down from there. A lot of questions, suggestions, comments. We provided all of them to you in the staff report. I won't get too detailed into them, but hey, doing a quiet zone sounds like a great idea. Hey, we don't want a quiet zone. We like hearing the train noise. You know, I think that tended to be from folks that lived further away, maybe, that weren't as close to the tracks. There was fairly universal support for improved pedestrian crossings and safety down there. There was concern, you know, while over 50% said, hey, we think traffic signals make sense. There was also, traffic signals in Truckee, we're trying to move the other direction, you know, so now we're adding traffic signals, and, you know, it's not as obviously consistent with our values as if a roundabout could work here, as an example. So there were lots of opinions, and oftentimes one person's opinion was directly contrary to another person's opinion. Not unexpected for such a high-profile location, and, you know, for the number of people that use this intersection, that there's strong opinions on it and that they are going to be different. So I think there's a lesson that comes from that, which is that as we move down the road, pun intended, on this project, we need to recognize that there are going to continue to be differences of opinion as to whether what ends up being done there is what should have been done there. So even though, you know, in the survey information we got, there seems to be a majority that think traffic signals are appropriate, there's also another 40 to 45% that think one of those other options would be more appropriate. And so we shouldn't be surprised as this project evolves to continue to hear that kind of feedback and be prepared to provide as much information as we can as to why decisions are being made the way they are, and how things are playing out. There was also, within the project advisory committee that was formed, and in the public comments, a fairly strong recognition that improved pedestrian connections from West River Street to Commercial Row beyond what can be accomplished with this project is a good long-term goal. And that reiterates a goal that was established in the 90s in our downtown specific plan that identifies that same thing. So that seems to have been, I guess, re-emphasized through some of this public outreach and comments we've received. Again, a lot of other comments, a lot of questions and comments about why not do a grade separation, either by putting the trains below grade or putting the road under the tracks or over the tracks. The bottom line is we have looked at that, and it's, from a practical sense, it's just not feasible because of the grades that you end up with or the expense that would come along with lowering the train tracks through town. It would be, it wouldn't be something that we would be accomplishing anytime soon. So, and again, pedestrian crossings were something that came up consistently through both the project advisory committee and some of the comments that we saw. So with all of that, our recommendation is that you as a council select traffic signals as the preferred improvement for the Reimagined Bridge Street project, and that you direct us to proceed with the 30% design for the traffic signal alternative. The one thing in my presentation I didn't emphasize a whole lot, but there is a project advisory committee that you as a council formed to work on this project and function as a sounding board for both you as a council and us as staff. Vice Mayor Goodwin's on that committee. The committee's recommendation is that we pursue the traffic signal as the preferred option as well. So if there's agreement on this from the council, the next step would be to then advance the project to a preliminary design phase that's focused on the traffic signal option, not spend more resources on any of the other three options, and then come back to you with some variations on a traffic signal option, with a median, without a median. There could be a couple of other variations in there that we would want to make some decisions on before we move into a final project design. If the council didn't agree with this recommendation, that's okay. We would, for instance, if you thought there was another option in here that warranted further analysis at a higher level of detail, you could direct us to do that as well. And there'd be some budget implications, but we'd figure that out with our consultant team. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you, Dan. Any clarifying questions? So look on the right side this time. Nope. Okay. Let's see. I just had a couple of minor questions, and maybe you touched on this already. The advantage, you were talking about median or no median with the traffic signal option. What's the advantage of a median in that situation?
The two that come immediately to mind is that from an aesthetic standpoint, at that key entrance to downtown, it would break up the roadway. And secondarily, it would, even with a traffic signal where you've got traffic stopped in one direction, having a median that that provides another level of pedestrian connection, of pedestrian safety for those crossing movements. So those are the two things that I could see of being some benefit. The disadvantage is it means making the road a bit wider, which means the pedestrian crossing is actually a bit longer, even though it's broken up by travel lane or by direction. And then it would have more significant right-of-way impacts on properties most likely on the east side of the crossing.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And with the recommendation here and the 30% design, taking it to that level, what's the significance of 30%? Why not go further?
The idea is that 30% design right now we're at concept design. 30% design puts a higher level of, engineered truthing to the option, fleshes out, are we going to have to acquire right-of-way or not? What are some of the details that are going to be necessary to implement the project, short of the full-blown design that we would take out to construction? And it's an intermediate step to make sure that there isn't some aspect of the project that we haven't identified yet that gives us significant pause or significant concern before we go to the construction phase.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense. All right. If there are no further council questions, we'll open this up for public comment. And Susie Tarnay, if you could state your name when you get to the podium, appreciate that. And you know the drill.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Tierman. My name is Susie Tarnay. So I'm just going to jump in. I'm concerned about the signals proposed for Bridge Street. It appears that our primary goal is pedestrian safety, but our modeling only models vehicle motions. So in Walkable Cities literature, there is currently the suggestion that evidence is now showing signalized intersections are not a safety improvement for pedestrians. I'm just going to use some quotes here from folks in the industry. Reed Ewing, who wrote the book Traffic Calming, State of the Practice, said, "They're good for traffic control, they're not so good for traffic calming. In other words, they help make traffic flow in a more orderly fashion, but not necessarily in a safer one." Another quote from Sam Schwartz, the former New York City traffic commissioner. "You'll find the side street speeds actually increase," said Schwartz. "When cars see the green light, they may floor it." A final quote from Transportation Alternatives Safety Campaign Director Lindsay Ganson. "Because traffic signals are not self-enforcing, they don't come with a physical component that requires drivers to slow down. They can easily be ignored by drivers. Traffic can be calmed and pedestrian safety improved with other treatments, like speed humps or curb extensions, that are physically self-enforcing, treatments that force drivers to regulate their traveling speed." So as I see it, the issue is vehicular speed coming down Bridge Street, at least for the west-east River Street intersection. Do we have data that shows traffic lights will actually provide a safer environment? Do we have pedestrian traffic counts being taken, not only on like wintry mixed Tuesdays in November, but also on our glorious crowded Truckee Thursdays? Do we have the data about the frequency that we suffer pedestrian accidents in these intersections? And furthermore, will there be a later analysis to assure that signalization has rendered these intersections safer for pedestrians? And if I'm wrong and the science shows that they are drastically safer, please accept my apology now. As far as the signals in action, the National Association of City Transportation Officials note in their design manual, pedestrian non-compliance increases with relative detour and delay. Delays exceeding 40 seconds at signalized crosswalks may cause risk-taking behavior. So if the signals are approved, please consider very short cycles so that they're actually useful for the pedestrians as well. We want to increase our pedestrian walkability. So again, I'll quote the manual. Designers should take into account both existing and projected crossing demands. Frequent crossings or frequent ability to cross reinforce walkability and can have the potential to fuel greater demand. So if we build to accommodate pedestrians, hopefully we will just get more pedestrians. Finally, my last thing, I am personally thrilled that there are bike lanes. Can I finish my sentence? In these proposals, but I respectfully ask that enhancements be explored, such as removable bollards, green lane paint, and diagonal stripe buffers, just to provide more safety for our alternative transportation modes. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. What was the name? I'm sorry, the manual again that you cited, was it traffic calming? Is that the name?
Let's see, the first one from Reed Ewing was traffic calming, state of the practice. And then the other one was the National Association of City Transportation Officials.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to maybe give Dan or Jessica an opportunity to, there's a lot there. If you have any responses, thoughts on Susie's comments?
Yeah, a couple of comments. So I agree that traffic signals are not necessarily a traffic calming strategy. One of the things we're reasonably fortunate with at these intersections is because of the downtown environment they're in. The vehicle speed, with the possible exception of traffic coming across the bridge, is not one of the problems that we have here. The vehicle speeds on Commercial Row are generally dictated by the street design on Commercial Row, the presence of the angle parking, et cetera. Similarly on West River Street in the vicinity of the intersection. Traffic coming across the river does tend to come in hot, which is one of the challenges we have with pedestrian crossings. If you've ever been a pedestrian at the West River Street, Bridge Street intersection trying to make an east-west crossing movement, that the existing traffic coming through there is coming in an uncontrolled is, when I say uncontrolled, there's not a stop sign or something that forces you to yield to a pedestrian. So that's the most challenging pedestrian crossing location. And then on the north side of the tracks, the intersection of Bridge Street and Commercial Row, the southern approach to that intersection also is not, there's no stop control or any kind of control that requires a vehicle to yield to the pedestrian, which is one of the things you actually do get with the traffic signal here. A lot of the other items that Susie referred to seem to be related to the types of things that would be looked at as part of a 30% design, more analysis of multiple time periods and the interaction between cars and pedestrians and how to best accommodate that with signal timing and intersection design. So I'll stop at that.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any other public comment on this item?
I did want to add one more thing. We did do pedestrian studies before we started this project. So we have the numbers from summer days and winter days that were factored into this. And Lauren's here today too, who's our traffic engineer. And I believe that there are people crossing the streets in the simulations that we did. They're just so tiny that you can't see them, but they are there. And they do reflect the numbers of people that were counted during the crossings.
All right. Yeah, and I neglected to introduce the fact that our traffic engineer and civil engineer from the consultant team that's helping us with the project are here in the audience, Lauren Chilson and Debbie Jenkins.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. All right. Well, thank you, Jessica, for that clarification. And again, thank you, Dan. I see no further public comment. We'll close public comment and bring this back to council for any remaining questions, deliberation, discussion. So who would like to start? Dave, you have to. Come
on. So just a quick, I do have one more quick question. Are we anticipating that the Donner Pass Road control will continue in a similar activity as it is now, because we can't back up cars on the tracks, right? So that'll continue to be kind of like a pass through, and traffic will get held south of West and East River Streets for that whole stretch.
Yeah, so what would happen is if we pursue the signal, it would be designed to interface with the railroad tracks, and you would have different signal timing patterns whether there's a train. If you'd have one pattern when there's no train around, you'd have another pattern if a train is approaching, and then you'd have a third pattern when a train is actually blocking the intersection. And each one of those would be tailored to the traffic movements that you want to have occurring in each of those conditions.
And is that all like custom software, or does that exist in other communities?
It's pretty common.
Okay.
Traffic signal preemption with railroad tracks is fairly common in the U.S. The roundabout preemption would be much more unique. Not impossible, and we're not afraid of it if we thought that was the right option. But traffic signals near railroad tracks are fairly common on a national scale.
Yeah, totally. Cool. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation here, and, to put just a little more juice to your comments, Susie, I totally agree with just about everything you mentioned. I do, also agree with kind of some of Stan's responses, specifically being we're not really. This absolutely is about pedestrian control, but it's definitely, at least in my mind, about sort of traffic control and sort of just making those intersections work a little bit better. Malfunction junction is a term that often comes to mind. A lot of people have their own pet names for that intersection. So to me, it's sort of kind of like an all-in type of solution, rather than we're just really looking at one symptom that we're trying to fix. So I think in this case, and I too am a roundabout diehard and will definitely support them as much as possible. This just might not be the right place, and so I'm cool with that, and think that we're on a good path here with at least making the traffic pattern a little more predictable for both our locals, our visitors, and newcomers who are just unfamiliar with the flow of both of those intersections there.
I agree, and I would also love to explore the idea of the medians as well. I think it can be beneficial for the pedestrians, and I've also been in a near miss on a Truckee Thursday from a fast-moving driver, so I would appreciate exploring that option. With that said, I'm really curious, Morgan, thank you for participating on the committee. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say or what your thoughts are. But that's where I'm aligned right now, is that I would, the roundabout video was just, it didn't seem logical to do the roundabouts here. I appreciate that we as a town love them. But I think that the traffic signals do make the most sense to explore.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I think that the committee was very efficient and focused and came to a conclusion fairly quickly, and the public comments, I think, really confirmed that. I think that I initially was not sure that I was surprised the traffic lights kind of emerged as the best option, but even as someone who's thought about that intersection for several years on council, there was more factors that emerged that we had to take into consideration than I even thought at first. I think that Susie, I absolutely agree with everything you said, with the exception of kind of having already gotten to my own conclusion that I think that the traffic light fundamentally is the right choice, but I think everything else about bike lanes, bollards, and bulb outs, and et cetera, are stuff that we want to explore in the additional design. And I think the caution, one of the alternatives that we looked at had expanding Donner Pass Road, Commercial Row, kind of adding an extra lane to facilitate, left turns, straights, and right turns. And that would be something that I would definitely not be in favor of. I don't think that making that a longer pedestrian crossing is enhancing the goals of the project in any way. So it was an alternative. It was not the one kind of shown to the public. And I just want to reiterate that I think that's the right direction. We should not be increasing the width of the pedestrian crossings unless we're adding the medians, which I do think are worth exploring. So, really just summarizing the staff report and the work of the committee, and excited to keep pushing this forward. The one other comment, Dan, you and I had talked about the importance of finding some way to continue the public outreach. We've kind of done this burst of public outreach around the survey and getting to this point, and now there's going to be a period where we're doing internal work, and then all of a sudden construction will start at some point. And how do we figure out a way to kind of keep that fire going? Because it could be a little bit.
I think that's a really good point, because there is that 47% that thought something else was a good idea. So we want to keep them informed. So that's a really good point. I just want to thank staff. I think the research, design studies, and public outreach for this has been exceptional. I want to thank the people that served on the project advisory committee. I too really wanted roundabouts, but I understand why we didn't land on them, thanks to the great research and studies and cool videos. Thank you, Susie, for your comments. I think I love the green painted bike lanes. I think they do have traffic calming qualities. I know they're a pain up here because of our snow and challenges with keeping paint on the pavement, but this is a pretty treacherous intersection for pedestrians and cyclists. So I think obviously during your 30% design development, you can investigate those options. I'm sure you will, and I look forward to you bringing them back to council. That's where I'm at. I think we're ready to move forward with this.
Speaking of green paint and the designs y'all worked up, I think the railroad ballast was green in a lot of those scenarios. I really like that look, like a greenway. So if we could work on that paint option, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I think for most of us who were not born in Truckee, we all remember the very first time we drove through that intersection. And for me, it was April 2nd, the year 2000. And you learn once and you never repeat your mistake. So I think a long time coming, a terrific set of goals for the improvement of this intersection. I agree with everything I've heard up here. I think the public outreach process was tremendous. And thank you, Vice Mayor Goodwin, for your role on the committee as well. It's a very complicated intersection. I mean, I think many of the things, Susie, that you highlighted in terms of traffic calming and pedestrian sort of patterns and so forth certainly make sense in the vast majority of situations. I think in this particular instance, this is a very unique intersection with two intersections very close to each other and a major train crossing in between the two. So I think, I do think that merits a special solution. I appreciate the 30% approach and your explanation of that, Dan, and I think, I share the opinion up here that this is the right choice. So, ready to move forward. So with that, entertain a motion.
I move that we direct staff to proceed with 30% design for the traffic signal alternative.
Thank you, Anna.
Second.
Thank you, Morgan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Thank you.
Onward and upward. Exciting. I think, I know we have only one item, but I think we may have some lengthy council reports since we haven't done those since April 23rd. So why don't we take a quick 5-minute break and then we'll resume and wrap up. Does that work? Okay.
Yes. It may have been the microphone wasn't seated. It may be the stick. I'm just going to later. Testing 1, 2. Yep, you're good. And the switch works. Test.
Yeah, I'm good.
Tom, just give us a signal. Okay, thumbs up. All right, we'll reconvene with item 7.5, direction to staff to focus General Plan Advisory Committee's current work program on housing and sustainability priority goals. Jeff Lux.
Thank you, Mayor Chairman and council members. This is a bit of a continuation of a conversation that we began, or at least had the remnants of, on May 14th at your housing element discussion. And it really comes from, there are really about 5 things at work here that led us to kind of conclude that this was an appropriate way to move forward over the next 2/3 to 3/4 of a year. And the main one was what I was calling process fatigue. And I think I won't show the slide again, but council's well aware and community's well aware that the town is involved in many public processes. You just heard the culmination of one very good one with Reimagine Bridge Street, but there are at least a dozen others. Planning staff in particular is involved in literally all of them, or nearly all of them, and the lead on most of them. But in addition to staff, the community is being asked and being stretched to those many, many meetings beyond their normal meetings. And you and planning commissioners and others as decision makers are being stretched. And we're feeling like we're starting to get to the point where we're sacrificing quality for quantity. And we're kind of, I use the term fraying around the edges a little bit in terms of our ability to produce good material on time, prior to meetings, comprehensively, which is what we prefer and which we think works. That's the primary reason for this. But there are a number of other things that kind of coalesced to form this recommendation. One was that council has continued to have priorities of housing, particularly affordable and achievable housing, and sustainability, and particularly addressing climate change as 2 of the highest, if not highest, priorities in your priority system. And at the same time, the General Plan Advisory Committee has asked actually for more time and more resources for both of those items at the same time. We put forward very quickly, as you know, the housing element that had to be produced for this August, and the General Plan Advisory Committee was requesting more time on housing policy questions. The Climate Change Subcommittee has begun meeting, and they requested more people be brought to that and more resources be brought to that in terms of other agencies and other people stakeholders need to be there. So those kind of priority needs kind of also coalesced. Add to that, item number 4, that we created we've gotten the opportunity to do 2 new processes. So ever ambitious people that we are, we said, well, we have the opportunity to get $160,000 from the state to do some implementation of the housing element immediately, or very nearly immediately, as of probably the middle of August, 1st of September. We could have that money and be moving along. And we think doing some strategic rezonings of key properties may be a very good use of that money. That does entail a process. Secondly, we were just awarded a week or so ago, or we were notified that we were awarded $250,000 to do some additional land use and urban design and urban economics work along Donner Pass Road to look for mixed-use opportunities and some opportunities to improve some of the properties on Donner Pass Road, a project that actually dates back a number of years and just didn't get done when the envisioned DPR was moving forward. Another process. So how do we fit all of these in? And then finally, the last thing that kind of coalesced into this thinking was our consultant team on the general plan and the downtown specific plan and the climate action work. Really, they're not falling behind exactly, but they're having to develop a lot of products, and the products are sort of barely getting done in time to get them out to the GPAC and get them out to the community. So they need a little bit of time to kind of really get the technical stuff, the background work all done and done really well, the mapping, the alternatives, things like that. So the solution that we came up with was this focusing strategy that's before you. The GPAC does require a lot of energy and effort. They tend to want to get things done. They're very assertive, which is great. They're very passionate. And we did have a conversation with the GPAC early at the end of last week, and they were very supportive of this idea of focusing their energies for the next, I'm going to say 9 months. We keep saying 6 to 9, but I think 9 months is more realistic in that time period. And the focus would be on housing, particularly achievable housing, and on climate change, which is both of those activities are kind of already in motion. So the idea would be you would give us some direction to focus the General Plan Advisory Committee on those two items. The General Plan Advisory Committee would still meet as a whole, but probably only a couple times during that period. We've already decided that the next meeting will be September. And when the GPAC meets as a whole, it will really be just to kind of compare notes between the two, I'll call them subcommittees, although they're actually kind of groups of the GPAC plus other stakeholders. Think of it as a kind of a typical breakout group workshop that lasts 9 months, where you break out in groups and you come back and kind of talk about what you learned. So there probably would be only 2, possibly 3 at the outside of GPAC as a whole, and they'd be relatively easy meetings to staff. They wouldn't require consultants because the work would be being done in the subgroups. We think this makes a lot of sense. We think it gives both staff and consultants a bit more breathing room to take on these extra activities. We think it can best focus energies on the 2 priorities. And we've spelled it all out here in the staff report. And as I say, the GPAC did, in fact, agree pretty much unanimously. We didn't take a vote, but we got a kind of a thumbs up from everyone that it did make some sense, and they were willing to kind of put themselves in one area or another. Doesn't mean people can't go to both, but the idea you'd focus on one or the other. So we're looking for just your general direction that makes sense and that we should move forward, because this is a bit of a departure from the process that you've gone on. Just so you know, other things will still be going on. There still will be community activity around the general plan. We're thinking this summer is a good time to do our pop-up activities. We'll pop up at Truckee Thursdays. We'll pop up along the Legacy Trail. We'll pop up maybe in a park to get kind of informal feedback, and that process is going to continue. The process on the website will continue. We'll continue to put surveys up there and information to get feedback, so that's not going to slow down. And then the technical work that's going to be done behind the scenes won't slow down. It may slow down a little bit, but things like some focused market analysis, which I know a couple members, Member Pallavi is really interested in, and the land use alternatives, which is really the heart of a general plan process, will get a lot of attention now that I think it needs. So we think this is a kind of a win-win all around. We'll see how it goes, but we're excited about it, and we're also anxious that we've got another $400,000 to work with in terms of really good planning and design for Truckee. And if you're interested in any more detail on any of this, I can probably go into it, or Danielle and Jenna can help me out.
Thank you, Jeff. Council questions?
Just a brief question. I mean, I I certainly appreciate the update and the kind of seeking of direction, but I'm also curious, it doesn't seem like something that would need a council direction to become the way the GPAC works. Am I missing something on that?
That's probably true. We could, once we once we had talked to the GPAC and they agreed to it, we could have probably moved forward with that. But we do have a master timeline that you approved and a master work program and $1 million of consultant work. And there's just a lot of pieces that council has approved. We just wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with this direction before we marched off into it. But it is probably something, I mean, technically, I don't think it's a council action.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. And it does seem like we're, in raising this and kind of framing it the way we are, we're saying, hey, we want to shift focus, but we're not necessarily going to kind of deprioritize or take anything off the table. We think we can keep, the essential work going, but we're also going to have this focus. I feel like we're maybe downplaying the trade-off here in an attempt to kind of smooth everything over and saying we're still going to be, we're still going to do everything we said we're going to do. We're still going to get it all done. Is it, which one is it? Are we?
Right. Well, as we note in the staff report, there will be some things that will slow down. So the General Plan Advisory Committee will not, over the next 9 months, be talking about circulation and transportation. They won't be talking about the noise element. They won't be talking about the open space or conservation element as much. And some of the priorities amongst GPAC members themselves will actually slow down. They won't go away, though we're certainly going to bring them back. But, for example, our chair of our GPAC is very passionate about river revitalization. And he said that over and over. That's one of the reasons he's on this committee. And he immediately, as I talked to him, said, well, that's what I really want to see happen, but I get it. I understand it. I'm willing to put that off a little bit. It's not going to go away. We're not going to forget about it. So some of those things will slow down, or they'll be put kind of in the next tier down. And but they're not going to go away. And the other thing we've said is that some of the work, like for example, circulation and transportation, you really can't talk about housing rezones without at least acknowledging it. You don't have to do the traffic modeling and the detailed analysis and all of that at this time. So some of that work is going to slow down for sure.
Yeah, and transportation and climate obviously have a huge overlap.
They do.
Is it too soon to tell? Like, do we think that let's say this is a 9-month decision, do we imagine that some of those other things, such as the river, noise, open space, do we imagine that we would do those quicker because of this prioritization? Or does this sort of push out the end of the general plan process?
I'm not sure I can predict that. Part of that will just be how the process works in terms of, community input and interest.
Yeah.
I don't know that it would necessarily speed it up, but I think we can catch up on most of those issues.
I mean, we did just have a conversation with the general plan consultant about sort of being adaptable, in that we had some work products that we thought we were going to sort of put on the streets, and then we pulled back and said, you know what, these would actually be more valuable if we just took more time to add some different type of information into them, including if we're going to do this market analysis. And I think through that effort of just being flexible and kind of looking at the immediate needs as this process changes over time does save us some effort. Having the GPAC work through the housing element was a good test case for us to figure out kind of how they were able to go through something in a short amount of time and be able to make recommendations. I think that was pretty successful. So that was a good gauge for us to use as we look at these other elements and topics that we're going to bring forward of maybe we don't need quite the volume of effort we thought we might have used in the beginning because we actually have a really engaged group. So we can adapt based on the responses we've gotten so far and just kind of shift the work to the things that are really core to the general plan update.
Great. Thank you.
Any questions?
I don't know if it's a question or comment, but I guess, to kind of follow up a little bit more on Morgan's comments, like, I guess what I was trying to feel out a little bit was, very specifically, what are we? So I appreciate prioritization. I think that's a good move. I think it's something we have to do. What I was trying to understand a little bit, and you kind of touched on it, is what is coming off the table in the near future, and how do we make effective housing decisions? How do we make effective rezone decisions without having the inputs of some of these other studies and information that are undoubtedly going to be needed on some of these larger projects?
So specific to the market study, you have that as an optional task in the general plan. And we just had a call with BAE, who's the consultant under Ascent. And what we all talked about, we think would be beneficial is the same thing as we're doing tonight, is to actually bring that back to you to look at and review before we have them do the work, in part because it's a very expensive optional task and we want to make sure that it makes sense to use that money, and two, that they're hitting the right targets that you have interest in, that the community is interested in. So although we're giving them guidance right now and they're going to refine their scope for us, we think that's one that you should look at. When we have that worked on, it'll happen kind of concurrent with while we're working on these rezones. And so they'll be able to give us some of the early analysis to be able to use to educate that process. And so we talked with them about how those will overlap and the importance of having that information, particularly when we're concerned about potential loss of non-residential land. So, is it our manufacturing sector? We're not even sure right now the scope of the problem, and so that's something that we've been giving them information on. Okay, here's what we understand right now, so that they can do that work and put that in their scope.
I would offer a little bit different take, or a different approach to that, and that is there's kind of process time and there's product time when you do a project like this. And product time, it tends to actually move quite quickly. It kind of moves at the speed of the sort of ability of consultant and or technical data to come in and be cranked out and be produced and put into a report. Process time can kind of go very slowly and can kind of lead you into some places you didn't anticipate. And so what this does, we think, is kind of focus that process on 2 ideas instead of 12 at once. So I think process time actually turns out to be sometimes more difficult to manage. I mean, and I'm the last one to argue against public process. I love it. I believe in it. We do it a lot. But I think you can also get to a place where the public process is kind of bogging you down and you need to get some product done. And I think this gives us a chance to do that.
I guess just to follow up on that then, what kind of product are we expecting? So considering the heightened timeline on the housing element, considering the fact that we're looking at the $160,000 for planning, so I guess, and I'm not trying to deny that housing is a priority, I'm trying to understand what we will get out of, as a product, out of prioritizing the GPAC's work on housing, kind of under the assumption that we're sort of coming to the point of, hey, we're going to submit our housing element regardless in the next 3 months, and then we're going to focus on, greater, faster implementation. So how does refocusing the GPAC get us what we want versus actually refocusing, whether it's staff or project-based stuff, to get us what we want?
Well, we're doing that. We're doing that as well, though. So I mean, this was couched in terms of sort of GPAC because that's kind of the public face. Mm-hmm. But we are, as Danielle pointed out, we're asking the consultants to sort of adapt their products. We're saying don't do a couple work products now. Save that money. Do some other things. Change what you're putting your energies into. So we're actually changing some of the technical kind of lineup as well to fit. So
do we have visibility on that? And that's not in our staff report, right?
It's mentioned in
I see are the processes listed. I don't actually see any products delayed or sped up or anything.
So what gets you say what products will come out of this? So the climate action group subgroup will create essentially a climate action element or plan. We haven't quite decided what to call it yet, but of the general plan, it'll be a draft that will then be able to fit in the general plan. And that's a pretty defined product.
Totally.
The housing group will do a couple things. The housing element, it's off and running. So that they will not do the current housing element. What they will do is in the interim, when we're waiting for the rezone money to come in and the rezones to start, or the rezone considerations to start. They'll work on a couple key housing policy matters that they didn't really have any time to do in this kind of hurry-up housing element process. For example, how to integrate achievable housing concepts into some of our inclusionary workforce concepts and ordinances. And then after that will be these implementation products, which will be presumably the rezone of, ready for rezoning of 4 to 6 properties, something on that score. And there may be some other artifacts that the housing group will be able to come up with as well.
So you're sort of using the GPAC as like a housing element implementation focus group?
Yes,
that's what it sounds like.
Yes, in part.
You're basically going to take some of the ideas that are going to be in the housing element, running them by the GPAC, and using that as a soundboard to get some focus on what to tackle first over the next 6 to 9 months.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable way of saying it. And the number of GPAC members asked for that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say it quite in that way, but they asked to be more involved in housing policy and housing element stuff.
Okay.
But specific to your question about work products, because we didn't list them in there. So the Issues and Opportunities report was the next work product that was supposed to come out, and that was this month. And that's when we talked about putting that one on hold because we think it would be better utilized with the economic market study information that we think is important. That way we can use that as a really powerful tool for making decisions about our land use alternatives. One of the things we had already talked about was we should probably have a land use alternative that's looked at from an economic perspective. But we need that information first before we can even have that conversation. And we think just from a information sharing perspective, pushing that one out until we get that information will just make it a better product. Same thing with the newsletter that was sort of that one following. This was newsletter number 2, I think it is. So we'll push that one out too. So there are things that we'll get. We're just going to push them out. We're going to rethink them. We're going to make them a more effective tool, honestly, for that. What we haven't gotten into the nitty gritty of is sort of the downtown specific plan component of this. But in lieu of doing sort of the big kind of workshops during the summer, because we'll be doing housing stuff, we've been doing smaller ones. So I met with the Downtown Merchants Association. We did a mini workshop with their board. So it's sort of the come to you approach. We will be doing outreach through Truckee Thursdays and the pop-ups that we talked about. So we're just going to shift sort of our emphasis. But those are sort of the immediate products that we had planned to put out that will wait.
Thank you. I think it encapsulates a little bit, more specificity on kind of what I was looking for. So, just for the benefit of you all, obviously, I've been talking to staff about this market analysis report, just so that you guys are aware and sort of trying to make sure that we're staying focused on, that type of report to what I'm happy to hear you say, Danielle, to inform the land use opportunity exercise as we push down the general plan, but just also to make sure that we're not doing the stuff in a vacuum. And I know that's getting a little bit more into discussion, so I'll pause there and let you guys do your questioning and go back.
Any other council questions? All right, we'll open this for our one member of the public. Any comments? Okay. All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to council for discussion, deliberation, or feedback, input, I guess. We're not approving anything tonight, but we're just basically nodding, I think.
Well, and I think expressing the concerns and questions is really important, so that we'll, because a lot of this is a bit fluid at the moment. We don't have every detail worked out.
Okay. So with that, anyone care to comment, deliberate?
When do you continue?
I'll just keep in my train of thought that was going on anyway. Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think it's really important for us to prioritize. So I'm happy to see us actually prioritizing. I'm just, I've been a broken record on this, where we just having all of this data as we're moving forward and bringing some of these land use components to the community, to the decision makers. I think just having the full picture is super important as we move forward. I think we can all point to a few things in the past that have caused a bit of heartache not having all of the information and not having it current. So I'm kind of saying it in just some advice for all of us, like the more data, the better. It gives sometimes, but the more relevant, up-to-date data that can help inform contentious decisions as we're moving forward, I think is important. And as we look to grow as a community, we're going to be having these sort of conversations, especially with significant housing developments, higher densities, things like that. These are not going to be easy conversations to have in our community over the next few years, and we're kind of about to start having them in the next 2, and people have sort of been warming up for this. So that I'm absolutely passionate about moving forward with the market analysis, so I will continue on that train. And then just making sure that we're not planning in a vacuum and that we are looking at the bigger picture, especially on this housing stuff as much as we can, so that we don't get sort of bogged down on one project or one strategy, but we do have the opportunity to be flexible moving forward. And with that, I do appreciate the prioritization once again, so thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
I appreciate all of the questions that you brought up, and I think it's really important to look at really all sides. And when I read through the report and spoke with Jeff, and I'm feeling more trusting that, and maybe because I'm personally not as familiar with or comfortable with, but that the town and staff is going to tell us what their needs are. And if there's a concern that our community and our staff are being bombarded or overwhelmed, and that we need to just kind of take a step back and realign where our focus is. And then hearing that the GPAC is also aligned with that, I'm comfortable with, I guess, directing staff or nodding my head up here, in trust that you guys really know what you need in order to do the best work. So that's where it's landing with me.
Yeah, I mean, top lines on this, I think are very strategic and very insightful. I think that the council goals coming out of the council retreat affect the achievable, affordable locals housing, make Truckee greener, renewable energy, reduce carbon footprint. And that's to hear that same prioritization coming from the GPAC, to me represents an exceptional level of alignment in our community around what we're trying to do. And furthermore, I think that those two goals and the relationship between those two goals around how we build housing for our workforce that is closer to where people work, thus reducing carbon emissions, are actually, it's kind of the opposite of, siloing off issues. I think those are cross-cutting issues that inform the rest of the general plan. I mean, I don't know how much is going to inform the noise element, but certainly the open space is going to be informed by how we want to respond to those two things. And I think that within that, something I hear David saying is, it's not just, a town is not just, low emissions and lots of housing, right? It's also an economy. But I think my response to it is a little actually less about the study. I mean, I think that's part of the process and we should do that. But it's also about, as we have these conversations, how do we continue to articulate a philosophy of what the economic lifeblood of the town is and what direction it's going. And I would just take the opportunity to add that one of the pieces of feedback I heard about our general plan GPAC selection process was that we didn't really have much sort of business, sort of new non-resort economy business represented on the general plan advisory committee. And so in terms of thinking about what are the jobs that people are doing in Truckee, what are the businesses that are growing here in the future that we don't have now, that I would just point that out as a blind spot. So I think, tag teaming on that, I think the study's part of it, but I think the philosophy is also part of it. And, but I think it fits in well with what we're talking about. Last piece of feedback, we've talked a lot about, process fatigue. It's a real thing, and it does require a discipline and a management to say when enough is enough, and I think we're doing that tonight, so thank you. But one point that I found myself caught up on is that sometimes I think processes are presented to us as a more specific thing, and the example is that the housing element. I think I thought for a while that the housing element that was going to be finished in August was the same thing as doing the rezone of the properties recommended by the housing element. And to hear that's a separate process, I still find myself wondering, sort of the same people are going to come to the same meetings to talk about the same properties to decide the thing that we already decided in the housing element. How much of a separate process is that really? Like it feels a little bit mushy when we talk about where does one process stop and another start. And I would just, in my mind, there should be synergies that we can have where you're having a public hearing about a thing. I don't know if it can legally serve the same, multiple purposes, but the same people are in the room talking about the same issues, and, let's look for process synergy as much as process fatigue. So overall, again, bringing it back to, I think that the big thing being presented here really is that, and this top line is a really good example of that. And I think there's a couple little pieces there that I wanted to make sure we really keep focusing on and head in the right direction. So.
Well, as one of the people that has attended every single GPAC meeting, I'm actually incredibly grateful for this process. I think I'm all about efficiency in everything, including investment of time and energy. I think we can create a lot of efficiency for these two very, very important goals by segregating, some people are going to come to both, but by allowing the people that are really there for one primary goal or the other, or have a particular affinity for one or the other, is going to create some efficiency in this process that I think the entire GPAC is appreciative of, which is why they were supportive. And I was actually going to make the point that Morgan already did, that we are incredibly, we are in an incredible position to do a lot and get a lot accomplished because we have such consistency and synergy between the council goals and the vocalized and asserted goals of the GPAC as well. And it is clear that all of these other elements are going to get attended to, and that people want to feel like they have accomplished something and that they have some information to inform the rest of the process. And I see staff responding to that need. So I'm very supportive of this shift in prioritization. I just want to thank Jenna and Danielle for your work to date on this. It's been huge, a huge investment, and I really appreciate it. And I think this is going to be great for us moving forward.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. As with Anna, I also serve on the GPAC. And, what has struck me is that we have an exceptional committee, in my opinion. I think we've got a lot of talent, a lot of varied backgrounds on that committee, and have not seen some of the attrition that was predicted at the onset. I think we've had excellent attendance really from the very beginning. So very engaged group. And I sort of liken this or think about it in terms of a mid-course correction or recalibration, if you will. We've taken off, we've launched, we're on our way. I think I think it's the right call to focus our efforts on housing and climate action. But I think it's important, kind of back to Dave's point, is that none of this is being done in a silo. This is very much an iterative process. When we think about housing, we are going to be thinking about transportation and links and vice versa. When we get to the point where we're talking about transportation, we're going to be thinking about nodes of housing, business, our downtown node, et cetera. So everything, to underscore, everything is going to get done. Everything is going to get looked at. And along the way, it's just that we're kind of taking a step back and correcting our course to ensure that we do it in the most efficient and effective way. And I think, the fact that we had broad support among the 20 or so GPAC members was, I think, certainly an endorsement in my view, and I think it's the right way to go. And again, one other thought, and I didn't ask this last week at the GPAC meeting. One other element that is included is that we've been looking at, and we have a lot of momentum, is the public art master plan. I think I want to underscore that is not stopping.
Completely independent.
Completely independent. However, it's an independent process, but there's a tie-in to the general plan.
There is.
Yeah. So.
And a tie-in to staff members because it's the same staff members. Yeah. The other one we didn't mention this evening was the climate vulnerability piece, which really will ultimately marry up with the climate action plan. They're one and the same. We just happen to, again, have this kind of chunk of money with a consultant that's doing some technical work. So, but that continues as well. The one thing I didn't mention at the beginning, which I think is important for the community to understand, council, of course, very much understands it, but the council has been very supportive of providing the resources necessary to get all this planning done. And I think people need to, we talk about process fatigue and, staff burdens, but, if the budget moves the way we talked about it the other day, there'll be a housing coordinator position that will be able to assist with some of this work. We are not unlikely to have another planner, midway through the year. We haven't funded it, but it's programmed, and we're going to look hard at that. And there's a lot of consultant dollars in these various places, some of which outside funded, some of which general fund funded. But appreciate that financial support, because without it, I think very little of this could move forward. Certainly not simultaneously the way we're trying to do it.
Yeah. I was just going to sort of wrap up by saying it would be my hope that we're not necessarily elongating our time frame tremendously by doing this recalibration. I think our goal should still be to try to come to a conclusion within the same time frame that we agreed upon when we started, to the extent that that's feasible. So, yeah. Okay, so we're not voting on anything. Okay. All right. Good deal. Okay, with that, council reports. We'll start with Councilmember Abrams, and remember we haven't had council reports since April 23rd, which was our last sort of regular kind of meeting. We didn't do it during the workshop, May 14th. So we're going back to April 23rd, Jessica.
I went through my calendar. I'm going to have the shortest. So the budget meeting on May 16th, we were all at that. I went and watched the Dancing with Sierra Stars event, which was quite entertaining. And that's everything I've been to. I intended to do the Memorial Day ceremonies. I had my 2 young kids at home, and with the inclement weather, we decided to stay in. But we are looking forward to picking up trash on Saturday.
Thank you, Jessica. Council Member Closeshot.
Okay, well, last week I attended another LAFCO meeting where we reviewed the first draft of the Eastern County Water Service Sphere of Influence, including our own Truckee Donner PUD. That was actually really very interesting. So that's just the first draft. We'll be bringing that to the community in a couple of different forms. We also had multiple GPAC meetings during that period of time, as well as our Climate Vulnerability Task Force kickoff meeting, so I got myself another committee to be on. And then last Wednesday, I enjoyed a meeting with, what was it? It was nearly 50 people, right, Jeff? Discussing the possibility of doing a large-scale forest health project in our region. So that was pretty exciting. We're just at the ground level of discussions and bringing in stakeholders, but very promising. And then going all the way back to actually April 24th, the day after our last meeting, the mayor and I attended the Wildfire Prevention and Preparedness Town Hall, which was extremely well attended. But for anybody at home that is still watching, you can still watch the recording on ttctv.org. I highly recommend you do that. I also got to watch the mayor cut the ribbon for the new train depot, which was pretty exciting. And then related to that, it's kind of off the cuff, but I went to the world premiere of the classic series Requiem, commissioned by the Reno Philharmonic. And they did a special commission for their 50th anniversary, which also corresponds to the 150th railroad anniversary. And so it was very much so that focused on the railroad, even down to the what's that one? The Morse code. They incorporated Morse code of done, because that's how they sent the signal to Washington, D.C. that the Golden Spike had been laid. It was very interesting. And then I enjoyed the town-sponsored 2020 code update, which was also very well attended. And Kat and I are working on trying to identify some community interest for other seminars and possible workshops on energy efficiency business opportunities in Truckee.
Thank you, Anna. Councilmember Pallaby.
Sure. I attended a TBID board meeting. Have another one tomorrow. And also a couple of just sort of individual meetings with some of the people on the TBID board, along with a chamber board meeting and a small private meeting with one of their board members as well. Met with the project proponents for residences of Jaboom, just to get a little overview from them of where they're at. I met with Matt, Mountain Area Preservation, on a number of topics, some event-based, but some also just to hear about their litigation going on at the top of Smartest Valley West. That's the word I was looking for. Presented, or was the speaker, I guess, at CAT's. What is that committee? The Legislative Affairs Committee? Is that the one that we went to? I did that. Mostly talked about housing, actually. It was quite interesting. And that is a lot of volunteering with school here in the end of the year. So just some fun stuff there too. So.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Vice Mayor Goodwin.
I attended the budget meeting along with all of you. We had a Bridge Street workshop to kind of finalize the recommendation for tonight's meeting. It went very smoothly. I attended and helped facilitate a panel for the Mountain Housing Council's annual update. Our town manager was one of our esteemed panelists, and the topic was sort of examples of density and ways to do make better use of our space to create housing. Was not able to get to Earth Day at Reno in Squaw, but I went to the Reno celebration and was very impressed with I think that the entire event produced less than 5 trash bags full of waste for thousands of people that attended. I was very impressed with the whole turnout. Just a little example. And then Jeff and I also were both went to a sort of sustainability symposium in Reno, hosted by a consulting group down there. We both spoke on different panels about elected leadership on climate change, and also on planning and other practices. It was sort of a great meeting of the minds of the North California and Northern Nevada practitioners. And then I did also just want to mention Jessica Abrams and I met with a daycare provider briefly. Yeah, I think it was in this past thing, but I just wanted to mention that she had reached out to us to talk about how, how difficult it is to run a daycare center here and the impact that has on working parents, and was generally kind of looking to brainstorm ways that the town could be more proactive in helping to ensure that, when commercial space is built or renovated, and when, space is a big issue, and being able to rent space that you can actually run a daycare center kind of business out of is an incredibly short supply. And, we didn't come up with any crazy obvious brainstorm ideas, but I did just want to really raise that here because it is a need in our community, and I see that, and I don't even have to deal with having kids to go through it, but I think you could probably underline that pretty well.
No, it was a really interesting conversation. And to follow up, it wasn't a public event, but I also met with the directors of Inner Rhythms and Trails and Vistas, and we had a really interesting conversation around how performance art is also art, and started the conversation on the possibilities of how they might obtain some support to ensure that the nonprofits in our community that are focused on the arts are able to continue to succeed and to thrive.
That's right. I forgot I had a conversation with them as well. Yeah.
So a lot to cover since April 23rd, and I will try this in rapid fire succession here. As with Anna, she mentioned the wildfire preparedness seminar April 24th at the Alder Creek Middle School. Extremely well attended. I don't know, hundreds of people. And I think the largest panel I've ever seen. About 15, 20 folks, but extremely informative. GPAC, April 25th. The annual Mountain Housing Council update in Kings Beach on the 27th that Morgan mentioned. Jeff was there. Also very well attended, very informative. Cut a couple of ribbons 2 days in a row. May 10th, the 150th anniversary of the railroad celebration, and then the soft opening of the Truckee History Museum, which I think is going to be a terrific addition to the depot. And then the very next day, the grand opening of the Mountain Consignment Store right across from the diner on the corner. Joint Planning Commission Council working, well, I guess that was a regular meeting, so we don't have to report on that. The 16th, the Tahoe Sierra Expedition Academy, I think that's the name of the school. 9th grade class, geography class, came to this chamber, and I spent an hour with them. They were sort of a civic lesson in a way, talked all about town governance. Great kids, great discussion, a lot of great questions. Budget workshop on the 16th. Attended a Reno Aces ball game sponsored by the Tahoe Forest Hospital District on the 17th. That was a lot of fun. Dancing with the Stars. I think, Morgan, you did that last year, I believe. So
did my duty.
Maybe someone else has that in their future next year. I don't know how those nominations are made, but we'll figure that out.
Just say yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Just
And Sister City Committee did some. We met on the 20th. I think we're kind of narrowing some things down. Hopefully, we'll have some things to report here sometime this summer. GPAC meeting the 23rd, and then yesterday, very moving ceremony, Memorial Day service ceremony at the Truckee Cemetery. Quite a number of veterans there. I think it was very well attended considering the weather. Susie, I saw you there with your family. Thank you for coming. So that was yesterday. I think a very meaningful, touching event. So that's my report. With that, I think we are done, and we are going to adjourn until June 11th, 6 p.m. Thank you.